Right, I will call the Monday, December 21st board meeting to order. Due to current conditions and mitigations placed on our region by the Illinois Department of Public Health and in accordance with guidance provided by the Governor's Office, the DuPage County Health Department, and Naperville 203's Legal Counsel, this meeting is being held virtually. Current Tier 2 resurgence mitigations require meetings to be limited to 10 individuals. Public comment is accepted electronically, and all comments received are posted in board docs under public comment. Since 5 p.m., the board has been in closed session to consider the following: discussion of minutes of meetings lawfully closed under the Open Meetings Act for purposes of approval by the body of the minutes, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district, litigation, when an action against, affecting, or on behalf of the particular district has been filed and is pending before a court or administrative tribunal, and collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives. I will entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
I move to come out of closed session. Gerke.
Second.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong.
Aye.
Gerke.
Aye.
Fitzgerald.
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Yangroor.
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Kosminski.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We are in open session. Good evening and welcome to the December 21st board meeting. Our mission is to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Board members present this evening: Kristen Fitzgerald, Donna Wanke, Charles Kush, Christine Gerke, Joe Kosminski, Paul Leong, and Janet Yangroor. Student ambassadors present this evening: Shay Doshi and William Ma.
Okay, please join the Board of Education in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have reached the point in our agenda for good news.
I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director of Communications, Seneca Mondini, to share some good news.
Good evening, everybody. We've got a couple good announcements tonight. Aditi Patel, who's a sixth grader from Kennedy, was our award-winning holiday card submission. We had about 80 holiday card submissions, and I don't know, it's in board docs, and I don't know if you're gonna be able to see that sort of, it's our award-winning snowman. So congratulations to Aditi for that. And then I also want to announce some all-state winners for the Illinois Music Education Association, including Dane Engman, band for clarinet, Anna Fosco for all-state chorus soprano, Isabel Horning for honors chorus soprano 2, Colette Motan orchestra for double bass, Timothy Park also for band for the oboe, Annabelle Punsel for honors chorus alto 1, and Alexander Simmons band for the tuba. And then we had two individual award winners out of Naperville Central, including our arranging first place went to Disney Go by Simeon Lee from Naperville Central, as I said, and then instrumental large ensemble third place for Avalanche by Matthew Felbine. So congratulations to all those students and continuing to do their art during this. So thank you.
Congratulations from the Board of Education. That is good news. Okay, so we have reached the point in our agenda for public comment. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public at its meetings. We regret that due to guidance received by our DuPage County Health Department, consistent with current mitigations limiting in-person professional meetings to 10 persons, we are meeting virtually and thus unable to receive public comment in person. However, all individuals who wish to submit a public comment are able to do so by email, as has been our practice at our virtual meetings during the pandemic. These emails are included as a part of the record of our meetings and can be accessed under public comment on our website. We will now read the public comments aloud. Individuals will be identified by first and last name. Comments by individuals shall be limited to 3 minutes. If an individual has submitted multiple public comment emails, they will be combined and limited to 3 minutes. When 3 minutes have been reached, Mrs. Patton will announce time, signifying that the 3 minutes have been reached. The complete comments will be included on our website as a part of the public record of tonight's meeting. If a person is representing multiple individuals or group, their public comment shall be limited to 5 minutes. Okay, we can go ahead and start the reading aloud.
Wonderful. Okay, our first submission comes from Christine Warrens. She writes, mom of high school students and practicing healthcare provider in the community, what I see related to kids with no motivation, sleeping during PE class because it gets out early, disengagement due to no connection with peers, no activities, no mentors to see in the school halls, no face-to-face interaction. Fear and anxiety from juniors who will now have to compete against those in other states and districts that are in-person learning for college placement. Increased depression, loneliness, anxiety, weight gain, and worsening health overall related to families in the community. Homes turned upside down due to e-learning or rather no learning process. Moms increasing alcohol consumption, more yelling, obesity, and poor health habits. Families dissolving and divorce rates climbing. What I know as a healthcare provider, working safely in the community with masks since 3/2020, they work. Local hospital cases down related to COVID numbers, 99% recovery rate of kids under 18 with COVID, health experts from CDC, Dr. Fauci, and pediatricians stating kids need to be in school. What this is, lack of leadership, transparency, planning, and education discrimination at its finest. What needs to be done? All kids need to be in person learning after the holiday break at the latest. No phasing in. There is no evidence to support that process. Ask for help from surrounding districts that are open. Obviously, it's needed if you can't figure it out with your current team. Stop being prideful and get the job down or get someone who can. And most importantly, truly be an advocate for these children as that is your job. Okay. Our next one comes from Cindy Cashel. She writes, why are schools not open? There is no reason for over 8 months of no school, isolation, no socialization, grades dropping, mental illness, numbers increasing, and for what? A virus which exists on such a small percentage for children. Keep the compromised at home while the ones who can go to school go. E-learning for compromised. Teachers compromised need to stay home and teach in Zoom setting while the kids not compromised are in class with a teacher's assistant for help. COVID tests done twice a week. We are a thriving district and have the funds, or at least we used to be. You've done surveys and you know the majority believe schools should exist. Studies say the same. E-learning is not the same, so stop pushing your agenda. This is on the board and union. Sad part is some of you work for the taxpayers and this is out of control. The lack of support, transparency, and honesty is shameful. I don't understand why no one is held accountable for these failures because in my job, I am. If I don't go to work or fail, I lose my job. I can take a leave if I'm compromised, which might be answer for so many of you. I know these comments won't change a thing with your decisions, and most of us have given up hope on going back to school, so consider yourself successful in that. Many people moving and changing schools in January. I just don't understand why our once top-notch district is so far behind due to the BOE and union acting as the ultimate God and not caring for what is best for the majority of our own youth and the majority vote to go back to school hybrid. I can honestly say I live with myself each day because I fought for my children and others to be in school to help stop isolation, abuse, mental health, drug, alcohol abuse. That's not even talking about the long-term effects of taking away in-school learning, sports, clubs. This is not acceptable. I don't even know if the plan was ever to return. Were we all just misled, born and raised here and a product of this district, but truly saddened about the way the district is being handled for the last 9+ months. Disappointed and frustrated for sure. Do what is right for these children and put these kids in the classroom. Okay. Our next one comes from Mary Beth Baskin. Miss Fitzgerald, Miss Wonky, Mr. Cush, Mr. Leong, Miss Gerke, Mr. Kosminski, Miss Yang Rohr, I'd like the board to reinstate their voting right authority. The board is voted in by the people of this community to be their voice. By allowing Dan Bridges sole authority to make decisions regarding the return to learn plan, you are denying the public the ability to understand if the board is truly united on the direction that is being decided. If you are united, you should own your decision and let the community hear your vote. It is underhanded to give up your voting rights to the man you hired. There are no checks and balances. This is not how a board is supposed to run. It is equivalent to the House giving up all their voting power to Nancy Pelosi or the Senate giving all their voting rights to Mitch McConnell. If you have nothing to hide, then be transparent to the public. I believe we were originally led to believe it was a necessity, to give Dan all power so we can move quickly with decisions. Absolutely nothing is done quickly in this district. We have to wait months for any changes in schedules, let alone bringing more students into the classroom for in-person learning. I thank you for your service, and I understand none of you signed up for being on a board during a pandemic. However, if you are not comfortable making the decisions and having a voice, then you need to step down. We deserve to hear how our board that we voted in thinks about the approach being dictated to us. Many of you do not even ask any questions at the board meeting, so how are we supposed to have any confidence in the process? Take your voice back and give us some confidence in the process. Again, if you agree with Dan, then show your hand and vote accordingly. If you do not, then speak up and be heard. Okay, our next message comes from Elizabeth Rexela. She writes, hello, I just want to express my concerns in preparation for the meeting coming up. My first grade son is suffering absolutely terribly from not having any in-person learning. I have tried to get him held back to kindergarten and was told that won't be considered this year by the principal, since all the kids are behind, which is such a sad thing that a principal would even tell me. These kids need to be back to school. Everyone else we know in Hinsdale and Downers Grove and Wilmette had an option. Why not us? Even CPS has a plan for mid-January. This is getting so frustrating for parents to watch their children suffer. As someone who has had COVID and my son in private school contracted it for me, not one person or teacher in his class got it. I see firsthand that the spread is not there, and a few other kids at the school I have had it, and no teachers have contracted it. Children are not getting sick from this, and teachers are not getting it from them. Our kids now see that they are not important, and just that the teachers want what the teachers want is more important than their own learning. Is that really what we want to teach our kids here? Because it's exactly what's happening. One very concerned parent. Okay, our next one, Gracie Livy. Hello, has the district had an architect come in to assess how many kids could fit in the classroom school at varying district guidelines 3 and 6 feet? It would be helpful to compare this data when you conduct your next survey for those who would choose in-person learning, again, beginning 125. Then perhaps we'd be able to have more students come in than 50% split of hybrid that is being proposed, and would be able to be a better critique of the classroom capacity plan. Thank you, Gracie Libby. Sarah Evans writes, please help our children, please. I have a kindergartner who is behind in nearly every area. I have a 4th grader who worked hard to catch up in reading and end 3rd grade in a top group, and that hard work is gone. I have a 3rd grader showing obvious signs of depression. She is 9 years old, 9. Give parents a choice. All the experts say kids need to be in school, so why do you think you know better? We demand a plan. We demand back to school date. We demand answers. Please, please help our children. Okay, Anne Marie Fetro. Hello, board members. This is my 2nd time reaching out, and I really must stress again, which I'm sure you're getting several emails with the same sentiment, but I'm feeling very helpless at this point. I have 2 children in Lincoln and 1 at Naperville Central High. My sophomore daughter is struggling, and I'm so worried about what this remote learning is going to do to her with irreversible damage. She is withdrawn, depressed, and unmotivated. She's failing all of her classes, and even with extra help offered, it just isn't the right format for her to succeed. She had an IEP in elementary school, which went into junior high. She worked very hard as she did not want to be associated with needing any extra help, and she made so much progress that her IEP accommodations were being reduced. She was involved with several extracurricular activities, had friends, and was very enthusiastic about school. She was named not once, but twice as the Lincoln Lancer Student of the Month. Freshman year, she was very into going to extracurricular events, football games, and tried out for the swimming team. This year has been a disaster. She is crying at least once or twice a week about being frustrated and feeling like she just can't keep up with the remote learning model. Any progress she made over the last couple of years has disappeared. There is no social interaction. I don't understand why a board cannot figure this out. Why there has been months that has passed by and no progress is made to improve the situation. There are several other school districts that are figuring this out, including private schools, which goes to show you this has nothing to do with numbers or statistics or anything else. Plain and simple, private schools need to run or they will run out of business. It's a shame that public schools don't have that same motivation. Give these damn kids a chance to go back and do some sort of in-person learning. You are all single-handedly destroying a community of children. And when the mass exodus occurs out of Naperville, you will also single-handedly be responsible for the decline in property values. I am so disgusted and discouraged by this entire district and situation. My heart aches for my children and for this community. We specifically picked Naperville for the school district, and I'm not going to get into my long personal history, but I did specifically pick Naperville to put my kids in a stable environment where I knew I didn't have to worry about moving. For the first time in 6 years, I'm actually thinking about moving. I will volunteer my time free of charge to help implement a plan. There has to be something that can be done to get these kids back to some sort of hybrid model. Saliva testing at the door, rapid testing, something has to be done to get these kids back into their familiar environment. And what is the plan going to be when there comes another virus that is going to be deemed a pandemic? Our children cannot be yanked out of school and expected to thrive in a remote environment. This is unacceptable and disgusting that a group of elected board members simply cannot implement a plan to address what the majority of parents want for their children. Several districts and other schools are proving that it can be done safely and effectively. Why can't Naperville? Thank you for your time reading my message. Okay, this message is from Elizabeth Evers. Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Evers, and I have 3 children currently enrolled at Maplebrook Elementary and a 4-year-old attending an in-person preschool in Naperville. I began my advocacy for a return to learn in-person education for my children on September 3rd with my daily emails to you, Mr. Bridges, our superintendent, the Board of Education, Maplebrook Elementary principal, assistant principal, social work, and each of my children's teachers. Additionally, I have watched each of the board meetings and participated in a rally to open the Naperville schools on September 21st. As I sat down to write this public comment, the first word that came to my mind was gratitude to the members of the Naperville District 203 Board of Education and the staff at Maplebrook Elementary for listening to my concerns regarding my children's educational, social, and emotional well-being during this remote learning. Through my partnership with the Maplebrook staff, my 1st grader and 4th grader were both given an invitation to return to school for partial in-person instruction and additional support. Additionally, my 5th grader has been included in a list of students to be considered for this partial in-person instruction in January. On December 15th, my first graders attended her first in-person instruction in over 9 months. I will never forget the pure joy and excitement on her face when I dropped her off to meet her teachers and return to Naperville. My hope is that every student in Naperville District 203 has chosen an in-person instruction is given the opportunity to return on 1/26/21 as previously discussed by the Board of Education. I have been and will continue to be an advocate for my children's education as well as all the children in Naperville District 203. Sincerely, Elizabeth Evers. Okay, Emily Peter. Hello, my family and I are excited about the upcoming return to school. That said, I implore you to please consider 2 whole days for elementary children. If the hope is to limit teacher and staff and student exposure, wouldn't only seeing half the kids any given day be better? Not to mention the logistics of 2 drop-offs and pickups a day for school staff who are tasked with temperature taking, etc. 2.5 hours, with much of it eaten up by drop-off, pickup, etc. doesn't seem like quality time, plus all the extra cleaning, both the time and expense. Maybe make a food rule of assigned seating and only cold lunches. This is also a logistical nightmare for parents and teachers alike. If my preschooler can eat in school and without incident, perhaps the older kids can too. Thank you for your consideration, Emily Peter. Okay. Yasmin Alim Wooten writes the next one. Hello, Superintendent Bridges, Board of Education members, and District 203 administrators and staff. Thank you for your hard work in navigating the current public health crisis and for putting our community's health and safety first in your decision-making. I am writing as a parent of 3 D203 students to ask you to continue the adaptive pause on hybrid learning while DuPage County is experiencing substantial community spread of COVID-19. This request aligns with guidance from the CDC, which states that school administrators should look to local health departments when making decisions about the schools. Specifically, the CDC states if local health officials have determined there is a substantial transmission of COVID-19 within the community, they will provide guidance to administrators on the best course of action for child care programs or schools. Currently, the DuPage County Health Department states when community transmission of COVID-19 meets a substantial level, DuPage County Health Department encourages 100% remote learning to help protect the health, safety, and well-being of students, teachers, school staff, families, and communities. I understand that you are facing immense pressure to return students to school buildings, but now is not the time. Following the DuPage County Health Department's recommendation to continue remote learning during times of substantial community spread of COVID-19 is the responsible thing to do. This will allow our teachers and school staff to stay safer so that they can continue to deliver high quality instruction to D203 students and will help to limit the community spread. All three of my children depend upon their teachers' presence and active engagement during the school day and during the afternoon asynchronous time. Teachers' illness and absences will negatively impact their learning. Please keep foremost in mind the safety and health of school staff when making decisions about the return to learn plan. Thank you for your consideration. Yasmin Alim Wooten. Vicki Pietrus writes, I am writing as a high school staff member in District 203. I am beyond proud of my colleagues who have weathered the storm of impossible circumstances these past 9 months, as well as District 203 parents who have shouldered unbearable, unthinkable burden that they never signed up for. I would also like to thank Dan Bridges for his comments at the last Board of Education meeting that defended the recommendations made by the DuPage County Health Department to keep school mostly virtual for the remainder of first semester. Finally, teachers and administrators could plan with specificity what virtual learning with some in-person supports can and should look like for most struggling learners. However, I'm gravely concerned about the plans to switch to hybrid learning in January 2021, as well as some of the practices happening in our high schools right now. First, I believe District 203 needs to be center student voices, which should go without saying and is undoubtedly the most important piece of our return to learn plan. I applaud the Central Times and North Star for their journalism and hard work expressing very real concerns for their community, peers, and teachers, as well as the tenacious work they did to ensure District 203 had a COVID-19 dashboard. How is the district collecting feedback on what students think and feel meaningfully and on an ongoing sustainable basis about improving remote learning? I understand this is incredibly challenging and that we are all surviving our first pandemic. The answers to these questions require creative thinking. Perhaps let's ask students what they think could be sustainable and consistent method of gathering feedback to give their principals and teachers to improve their remote learning experience. Second, District 203 must center the most marginalized students and family voices. Not once have I seen a parent of color speak at a board meeting. Very rarely have I read letters from parents of English learners. This seems odd given Dan Bridges and the Board of Education's very public and thorough commitment to equity. Since a Board of Education meeting might not be the most accessible forum for all families, why did District 203 not do more to solicit their input and bring in public conversation? Folks seem to forget that our BIPOC, and working class families are likely to be suffering the most in this pandemic, and there is almost no meaningful public representations for their voice. BIPOC, as well as working class families, often rely on multi-generational systems for childcare, making a large number of students returning to in-person school more dangerous. Additionally, BIPOC and working class families are often required to work outside the home, which makes putting their children physically in school with half of their classmates more risky rather than in smaller targeted groups as we are doing now. Overall, I would never claim to speak for all of these families. I just want to acknowledge that their voices have not been heard, have not been centered in public discussions, nor have some of these concerns been mentioned in any letters I've read or board meetings I've watched. And while I deeply appreciate the advocacy for parents of students with special needs, there has been little public consideration for the science around how dangerous it is. The rest of this message is included in our board docs. Okay, Amy Vogel saying is our next one. Dear Superintendent Bridges and members of the board, I first want to acknowledge the difficulty of your position. There is no solution that will satisfy all stakeholders. I appreciate the time, consideration, and concern you put into your decision, knowing that you will face criticism no matter what choice you make. It is with this in mind that I advocate not moving forward with the hybrid plan on January 25th, 2021. There are many in the community who can speak more eloquently and with more authority to the public health issues, so I will focus here on my concerns about equity. I believe the hybrid model will further disadvantage the students currently facing the steepest barriers to academic success. Some have referred to COVID-19 as the great equalizer, but in fact, it has exacerbated existing inequities in our society. A confluence of factors from housing to healthcare has led to disproportionate suffering in Black and Latinx communities. Many students with disabilities are also increased risk should they contract the coronavirus. It is likely that many families with students who belong to these groups will choose the fully remote learning option when given the choice. Unfortunately, in the hybrid model, teachers will no longer be able to provide the same level of focused attention and care possible in e-learning when they are forced to simultaneously divide their energy between three groups of students, those in person, those at home that day, and those at home full-time. Not even Herculean efforts will make it possible to serve each group with complete fidelity. My fear is that those who are already made vulnerable by inequity will be further marginalized. Teachers who are human beings with finite resources will not be able to make up the difference. Two groups frequently raised by public commentators at Board of Education meetings are students with IEPs and English learners. One of the supports already successfully in use for these students is a co-teaching model that allows for greater individualized support and makes grade level curriculum more accessible. I have not heard a viable option for how co-teaching is going to work effectively in a hybrid model. In fact, I have not even heard it mentioned except when I or other co-teachers have raised the issue. In order to prioritize the educational needs of these students, we must find a workable solution for co-teaching. If we truly value equity, then our plans must begin with the students who have been most marginalized. That means directly soliciting feedback specifically from those students, their families, their teachers, and the other staff who work with them every day. I believe wholeheartedly in District 203's ability to create a plan that centers equity. We're not quite there yet. Sincerely, Amy Vogel, EL TBE teacher, Naperville North High School. Okay, Karen Wright. To the board and superintendent, thank you for addressing some of my questions from the last board meeting in the FAQ section of the district's Return to Learn page. I will attach all of the questions that you did not answer or answered so vaguely that your answer did not answer the question. How are lost IEP minutes being addressed? Your answer suggests that IEP students are receiving all their minutes. This, of course, not true. My own students struggled for the first several weeks doing anything online, therefore not receiving any minutes. My student struggles with all of the online content and has not gotten his full amount of minutes 1 week this year. Not for lack of trying, but because it is not possible to do online, so therefore it cannot be done. 2, please describe in detail our group of local medical advisors. At one point, the district had a group of local medical professionals that advise the district when needed. There have been parents that have commented in public comment and on the district parent Facebook page that have claimed to be in this group. They have also made public that they have not been contacted in regards to the pandemic, and some have even claimed that they reached out to the district with no response. If our medical advisory committee has been disbanded, please explain why. I realize the district is talking to county and state entities, but to my knowledge, none of the board or the superintendent have medical degrees. Our district needs a committee of local medical professionals to advise them to spell out what the state entities are advising and to weigh the pros and cons of hybrid, in-person, and remote learning, and then report their findings during the board meetings. The group needs to consist of local Naperville doctors, pediatricians, psychologists, psychiatrists, etc. They need to be specialists addressing both the medical needs of children and staff. Their guidance is crucial to the local reality of our situation. There are many 203 parents that may be able to help, as there are many medical professionals in our community. Number 3, I have not gotten response from the tech department tech tickets. Please guide me on how to get a response or give me a direct contact to address my issues. Number 4, mental health. What specifically has been done to up mental health interventions? I know that the SOS program had presentations in November, but we do that every year. Children's mental health should have been addressed on day 1 and continuously throughout this year on a regular basis. With this pandemic and the refusal of the board to try to reopen, will more social workers, school psychologists, and counselors be hired to ease the load? Or will we continue to leave parents and children hanging? How long do you think mental health issues can wait? It does not appear that the district has upped their plan to address these issues. Number 5, why does the district continuously claim that the size of our district is a reason for keeping us closed up? Yes, we have elementary, middle, and high school all under one roof. We also employ 1 superintendent, 5 assistant superintendents, a chief HR officer, a CIO, a CFO, and 2 executive directors. Divide and conquer. Treat our district as 2 or 3 separate districts. We have the staff to act independently and in turn have smaller groups of children the many other districts who are in person or hybrid. Maybe we should look into dividing 203 into separate districts so we can avoid this excuse. What do you think?
Time.
Number 6, how has the district plan to address
Time.
and the rest of this is included in board docs. Okay, Scott Person writes in, my name is Scott Person. I have a 2nd and 7th grader. When I spoke the first time at one of these board meetings, I said I would never stop fighting for my children. I speak because I ask you all to start fighting for our children and get them back into school. It can be done, as many districts and schools are doing it safely. COVID has put all of you in a very difficult and challenging position that is not up for dispute. How you are going about business is the issue at hand. I hear many people say that you are volunteers as board members and that you didn't sign up for this. I disagree. That is exactly what you signed up for, to fight for these students, even during challenging times. Is the task at hand difficult? 100%. Probably the toughest thing you have ever had to do and the toughest thing you will ever face. If this is something that you don't want to do or you find it too demanding, then please step aside and let someone that has the heart and determination to do what is right for our community and children. Someone that will go about it the right way. We have an amazing community that believes in volunteerism in making that tough decisions. The people that didn't sign up for this format are the teachers. The amazing teachers in our district were not trained to teach this way. They are handcuffed to get the best out of our children and connect with them while building an amazing community and culture within their in-person classroom. Let them do what they do best. Trust in them that they will provide a safe and positive atmosphere. I believe and trust in them 100%. That is why we live here. I do personally want to thank all the teachers and staff in 203, as you are doing a great job. I would especially like to thank everyone at Lincoln and Prairie. Another group that didn't sign up for this are our children. This isn't what they want or need. I spoke at a board meeting about the partnership 203 says it has with students, and I don't see it. We are blessed to have amazing students. Several of them have stepped up and spoke at these board meetings. Articulate and bright kids. When are the kids going to make up all the hours lost? In the summer, the hours lost in our children's education is piling up. But Kristen, you keep highlighting that we are an exemplary school district. That is a true statement, but you missed one thing. We are an exemplary school district. We can't live in the past. We were an exemplary school district. We can't live in the past. We need to find out what our future is for 203 and our students. Is what I am witnessing the future? What is our path to get back to an exemplary district? If you have this so-called partnership with the students, then why haven't you followed up with the amazing students that speak at these meetings? What a shame and what an opportunity missed by you all. An opportunity to learn from our students' experiences. If they are going to be brave enough to step up and speak, I would have hoped you would have the integrity and give them the respect to talk to each and every one of them. Kristen, you continue to campaign for Dan Bridges at meetings and in emails. I am baffled on why you are fighting so hard for Dan Bridges when you won't even pick up the phone to talk to the students that speak at these meetings or some of these parents that pour their hearts out their hearts. Instead of trying to save Dan Bridges' job, start fighting for our kids and their future. At the very least, take the time to listen to them. Give them the respect that you ask to be given from everyone that speaks at these meetings. It is a two-way street. What is missing from this entire
Time.
Okay, and the remainder of that message is in board docs. Okay, Ann Cedar writes, good evening. I am writing to ask that we move forward efficiently to get all students back in person. I absolutely understand there are many factors involved, some of which I don't even know, but I do fully believe it can be done safely. I keep hearing kids aren't falling behind, they are surviving a pandemic. But the fact is we don't get this time back. I have 4 kids, 2 of whom I can reasonably assume will end up okay after all this. They are engaged with online learning, and because of their unique personalities, strengths, and that they know their teachers and classmates, e-learning is working to a degree for them. It is still far from ideal, but they will adjust and get to where they need to be eventually. My other 2 children cause me great concern. The oldest is in 7th grade, a smart, hardworking student, and she is struggling. She spends each day isolated from peers, missing not only the connection with them, but a connection with her teachers that helps her achieve the standards placed on her. Academically, she will recover. Her teachers put in extra time and effort with her regularly and are understanding and kind about the situation. Keep in mind, this is a good student, honors math and PI, and yet she's having to retake tests every single time. What is worse is the effect on her socially. This is a crucial time when they should be naturally forming new friendships, understanding what they want from a friend and strengthening existing ones. They need to be in school to lay the groundwork and continue to build upon it. My youngest is a structured learning student in 1st grade. I cannot express how wonderful, innovative, and hardworking his entire team is. They have done everything in their power to make learning possible, both online and with all the guidelines and restrictions in place at school. It remains a major struggle every Monday to get him to log on, and as I write this, he has fully refused. A child who dutifully goes to private therapy daily, works on weaknesses at home, and puts in hard work at school has reached the point of enough is enough. It is heartbreaking. This is not a situation where anyone can say he isn't falling behind. He already is behind, and that gap will only continue to widen. I am thankful for the in-person time he is getting now, but it must be said that this is still not half of what he should be getting. I certainly want everyone to be safe and healthy. I recognize that that must be a priority. However, I believe that it can be done. We have the knowledge and science to keep our educators and kids safe while being back in our school buildings. The sooner that happens, the sooner we can increase time until we are back fully in person, and that needs to be the goal. Thank you, Ann Cedar of 1904 Woodfield Court. Okay, our next message comes in from Vanny Unagapin. Hello, Board of Education. Although I'm excited that students will hopefully transition to hybrid model in January, I'd like to share my concerns with this model. First and foremost, I really hope that there will be a hybrid model, since we have heard similar messages from the district multiple times since March, but then students continue to be in all virtual learning. This 2.5 hours of in-person learning creates hardship for all working parents, and I personally do not believe it is enough. I've sent multiple emails to you since March, and I feel that the district does not want to innovate and be creative. You proposed this hybrid model a few months ago, and many parents had concerns with this model. The concerns include extreme burden for working parents, including single parents. The district's assumption is that parents are sitting at home not doing anything and should have the time to pick up and drop off kids for 2.5 hours of learning. FYI, I do not have a school bus option where I live. My next option is to pay for full-time childcare when public schools are supposed to be free, paid for by our property taxes. My other concerns are having 2 groups of kids in the school on a single day means there is more likelihood of exposure. Why not have a full day of school for one group and then have a different group for a second day? This may minimize exposure. My second concern is standardized testing. I have emailed you, the district staffs, multiple times since August to ask about MAP testing and COGAT testing. All the responses have been that testing will happen when students go back in person. As I mentioned earlier, I'm hoping that students go back to school in January, but if any reason they stay in all remote learning, please have a plan on how these students will be tested so that they can be placed in honors math, PI, or PI plus programs. Even with this planned hybrid model, please share your plan on what testing would look like. How would honors math work with a hybrid model? I would have hoped the district staff would have taken the many concerns shared by parents over the many months and tweaked this hybrid plan. But no, you are adamant on keeping everything the same rather than adapt and listen to parents' concerns. As parents, as working parents, as members of this community, we have all had to adapt, adjust, and become creative and innovative. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same about this board. I know as the Board of Education, you are all volunteers, but you did sign up for this job willingly. So please step up and represent this community by listening to the parents' concerns and comments. On a final note, I want to say thank you to all the teachers who have stepped up and have made it work, despite the lack of leadership from you. The teachers are the ones who have shown us what true leadership is, and I am very thankful for that. Okay, John Malarkey. I'm again reminding this board that the global scientific community, from heads of state and multinational health organizations to doctors, scientific research institutions, and government agencies, have long since determined it a fundamental fact. Primary school education is not a significant source of COVID spread. I'm going to again list an abbreviated list of the members of the scientific and global educational community who, unlike the board, acknowledge and support the indisputable scientific evidence. The United Nations, UNICEF, the World Health Organization, CDC, American Academy of Pediatrics, Journal of American Medical Association, New England Journal of Medicine, the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Dr. Dimitri Christakis, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Ashish Ha, Dr. Mark Lipsitch, Dr. Amish Adil Shah, Angela Merkel, Emmanuel Macron, Boris Johnson, Michael Martin. I strongly doubt that any board member or even members of the politically crippled DuPage County Health Department can match the credentials of this group, and nor do we expect that. But what the experts have spoken with one loud and clear voice, we do expect you to listen. On a bi-weekly basis, we, the parents of 203, are continually insulted by a dogmatic obsession with cases and rates. I fail to understand the relevance of this data unless we are implying that The only COVID positive students in 203 are the select handful who are able to attend in person. FOIA requests have debunked this thoroughly. We are berated on a bi-weekly basis to wear masks and socially distance. Gallup, CDC, and numerous other polls have shown that better than 80% of Americans do so. And anecdotally, I cannot remember when I've seen folks in the indoor setting not wearing one or not distance. Please do not continue to insult our intelligence. The world ain't flat. Vaccines don't cause autism. Primary schools are not a significant source of COVID spread. To protect the well-being of my family, I've already had to remove one of my children from 203. When we did so, we received a message from the principal of the school assuming that our other child would be unenrolled as well. This leads me to the conclusion that we are far from the only parents who have pursued this path. Please stop this nonsense. There is no dishonor acknowledging a flawed decision. Show that you are willing to take steps to remedy the systemic flaws in the system. Return our children to school immediately, not this hybrid farce, but fully in person before it is too late. I truly hope my son will be able to return to in-person quality education in 203. Bring them back. All right, Laura Person. As you read this letter, there is a parent who cannot tune into tonight's meeting because they have to attend to their child's needs. Not the normal needs, but with their social and emotional well-being since this pandemic began 283 days ago. There is a parent who witnessed their child struggle today with their learning environment. That parent is thinking of ways to help or assist. There is a parent who heard their child say how they felt that literally stung their parent, is worried and mentally drained. Another parent has hired a tutor to assist or help while that said parent has to work. That parent will now have to watch this meeting later. This is a very small glimpse of what is occurring for our district families. If you are that said parent, you understand this ripple effect that exists and is prevalent due to the current situation we are in. Every day matters. Although I realize that not all children's change in behavior and home dynamics are due to school being closed, it plays a huge role in the children of our community. What our district needs to take into consideration for every single decision made is our families, the families in 203. This is a social, emotional, and academic ordeal. When our children begin to enter the school buildings, this will not be an instant fix. To assume or begin to paint that picture for any individual to think that rhetoric will silence comments or the pressure for you to do your job should be reduced is completely wrong. That is critical and very important to take into consideration. The results of your decisions during the pandemic will take time to recover from. So many of the community has written and spoken about the short-term effects that we know don't even scratch at the surface as to what will unravel, as to where our children are at socially, emotionally, and academically. What is District 203's recovery plan? I have asked and a committee hasn't been formed, let alone discussed. If it has been, begin to share at the board meetings. Again, when resources and those individuals in place at the administration level are not working on what matters most, it is maddening. You have read countless letters, spoken to parents who remain their children's advocates, and there has not been a shift of movement for our children so their academics and social emotional needs are met. It hasn't even been a full year, and emergency rooms have seen an increase in children and teens' mental health. Let that sink in. We are talking about emergency rooms. That doesn't include those that have met with or on the schedule to be seen by a mental health professional. Do you speak, listen, and then base your decisions on those conversations with mental health professionals for our children? Children are not only struggling with online learning, but some are not logging in consistently. What about our 504 and those IEP children that their needs have shifted or changed? All those services are not being met. A plan and progress have been based on in-person instruction. How it being modified based on completing these tasks over Zoom? Have you considered hiring more specialists or moving them from part-time to full-time? At what point will this be discussed at board meetings? What about maintaining social activities for our children so they have a sense of this community? Are we challenging our kids and setting them up properly for the gifted program? How long do we need to wait for developmental delays or show that no progress? Okay, the rest of this message is in board docs. Matthew Ewald writes, good afternoon. As we pass the nine-month mark of students being held out of school, I'm writing yet again to express my continued disappointment that our schools are not open to our students. I'm still hearing no official plan and deadline to get our students back in school, but rather a constantly moving target date. All the while, many surrounding school districts have been in school for portions of this year. Some have stayed open and others are now reopening after a recent pause. What happened to 203 being an educational leader? I'm watching my children regress socially, emotionally, and educationally. 2 children who generally enjoyed school no longer see a point in it. You managed to protect some people from getting sick at the expense of our students, and that will be the epilogue to the sad chapter in our district. Maybe the feedback loop is broken, and I wonder if the administrators ever randomly audit the classes being taught and notice very few on camera or talk to actual students directly and get feedback from them on their experience. Perhaps instead of, or in addition to, sending out more surveys, I encourage you to talk directly to students and get their feedback. Lastly, at every meeting, we hear the board president state no responses will be made to comments and that the superintendent will respond for the board. But I've yet to hear many of the complaints, concerns, or worries that are raised at each meeting addressed by the superintendent at any time after these meetings. Please open our schools. Thank you. Matthew Ewald. Okay, our next message is from Tom Ald. First of all, I think the board and administration should be commended for their hard work during this pandemic. You have been in the difficult position to balance the needs of students, parents, staff, and community. Under the current status of the metrics in DuPage County and the rest of the country, I believe it is imperative that we live up to the mission statement of the district and show that we are community contributors. In order to contribute to our community and prevent further spread of the virus, we need to be beyond cautious when deciding when to return significant numbers of students to the school buildings. Remote only or keeping the number of students in the buildings under 10% of building population should remain the standard for the foreseeable future. Moving to the hybrid schedule too soon, January 25th, could be dangerous to the children and their families and the school staff. According to a recent study, children are a key to spreading the epidemic. Research from the Princeton Environmental Institute, Johns Hopkins University, and the University of California, Berkeley found that children and young adults who made up 1/3 of COVID cases were especially key to transmitting the virus. Kids are very efficient transmitters, which is something that hasn't been firmly established in previous studies. We found that reported cases and deaths have been more concentrated in younger cohorts than we expected based on observations in higher income countries. Children and young adults were more likely to contract coronavirus from people their own age. Additional studies have similar conclusions. Study found extremely high levels of SARS-CoV-2 in children's airways, Massachusetts General Hospital and Massachusetts General Hospital for Children's study. Kids are getting COVID-19 in school and spreading it to families, Miller School of Medicine, University of Miami. Kids may play a bigger role in the spread of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 than initially suspected, Ontario, Canada Science Advisory Table on Coronavirus Disease 2019. New evidence suggests young children spread COVID-19 more efficiently than adults, Journal of the American Medical Association. 2 of 3 children who tested positive were asymptomatic, passed the virus on to someone else, according to the Research Centers for Disease Control. While remaining almost exclusively remote is not the situation that any of us would choose, it is the safest choice for all involved. It will help bring down the number of infections in our community while we wait for the upcoming vaccines to be administered. Okay, Sarah Forster. Good evening. Thank you for your service to our community during this most unusual of times. As a District 203 parent navigating 2020, I recognize that making decisions in these times is challenging. Though challenging, it is the board's job to ensure that District 203 students are educated even at times where external circumstances seem to make that education impossible. An all remote learning environment where parents have no options to send their children to in-person school is not a reasonable solution. Not for a week or a month, certainly not for 10 months. It is time to allow our children to return to our schools without hesitation. Our children have suffered irreparable harms already, learning losses that have already shortened their expected lifespans by 2 months or more. Trauma-induced mental health damages they will carry with them for an average of 9 years. It is time to stop the harm. It is time to look toward recovery. I have heard District 203 officials and administrators assert that COVID-19 pandemic is guilty of causing all these harms. I agree, circumstances aren't easy. However, COVID-19 is not culpable. The administration alone is to blame for ignoring learning and mental health harms. How much longer will the board continue to stand by without standing up for our children? Vaccines are available for the staff. The administration must arrange to procure the vaccines without delay. Meanwhile, the Return to Learn Guide presents many mitigations to assure that 203 facilities are safe, regardless of external metrics. Technology is in place for remote learning students to participate in school along with in-person peers. When will the board take a vote to make a record of position, yes or no? Who believes that it is time to stop harming our children and to begin assessments, restoration, and recovery? I'm writing tonight to urge the District 203 School Board to vote regarding school reopening on the January 4th agenda. Few parents and students trust the District 203 administration to bring children back to school on January 25th. The promise conditioned on favorable metrics rings hollow. Finally, I'm alarmed that the Return to Learn Guide presented no plan to fully reopen its schools to all 203 students. Vote on January 4th, 2021, yes or no. Choice to stay all remote or allow all 1, elementary and IEP students back full-time on January 13th. 2, junior high students back 2 full days per week, hybrid on January 19th, 5 days per week on March 15th. 3, high school students back 2 full days per week, hybrid model on January 26th, 5 days per week on March 22nd. Direct the administration to restore education for all students. It can be done. It is time. Sincerely yours, Sarah Forster, taxpayer and 203 parents. Okay. Our last message tonight is from Mark Nessum. The metrics as it stands now are no better than they were in August when Bridges and the BOE decided to start their year fully remote. How can pure metrics justify a hybrid model starting January 24th? Is this purely to save face on the part of the BOE and Bridges because the overwhelming dissent from families and taxpayers of 203? Or can we expect the same adaptive pause at the last minute? Why should anyone believe that there will be in-person instruction at all when parents have been burnt multiple times? How can there be any trust or confidence in how these decisions are being made or will be made, given the awful management thus far? If there is truly a plan for in-person instruction, why can't the Board of Education and the superintendent admit that their adaptive pauses were a mistake? Surely the metrics are not more favorable. All along, the superintendent had disregard for evidence-based policy. We had ample data, even early on, that schools were not in fact hotspots or super spreading areas of transmission. And now, more than ever, it is evident that the decisions were not based on public health data, but politics, union sentiment, and a whole lot of other things not related to the health and welfare of our kids. Now, in the face of overwhelming dissent, parents are left with the awful choice of believing that the administration was disingenuous but finally caving, or one that's incompetent but is attempting not to be. How can teachers be considered essential workers for purposes of the vaccine but still be teaching remotely? And why are Mondays fully remote? Is there really a marginal benefit from a public health standpoint to keep the kids at home on Mondays? Or is this just a slap in the face to the parents who are essential workers or on the front lines? I urge the superintendent to resign for his office and save the district from this incompetence. Dr. Mark Nessum. And all of these messages are posted in board docs.
Okay, on behalf of the whole board, we want to thank all of those who submitted public comments by email or have contacted the Board of Education. Reading your comments is a vital part of understanding the challenging issues faced by our community. Due to the volume of email, there are times when we are unable to respond in a timely way. However, all emails are read and valued greatly by the Board of Education. Issues raised in public comment will be taken under advisement by the Board of Education, but will not be discussed this evening. Issues raised during public participation may be added to future agendas or addressed by administrative staff. The superintendent is the board's designee to coordinate response to public comment and will apprise the board accordingly. As has been communicated by our superintendent, answers to questions raised in public comment will be posted on our website under frequently asked questions. This will conclude our public comment period. And that will bring us to our monthly reports. Listed in board docs are our monthly reports for Treasury, investments, insurance, and budget. Does any member of the Board of Education have questions about our monthly reports? I see a question from Donna.
Yep, so I was reading through the item 6.04, the budget report as usual. And this year, or this month, we had a different, the expenditures by object. I wanted to understand what the current month to date non-capital equipments were, because it was a higher expense than usual. And it's the first time that we've seen that.
Sure, that particular object defined as non-capital equipment is a new object that the district is using this year following State Board of Education program accounting manual standards. We have not used it in the past. It was a change that the state board made about 10 years ago. We're just adopting it this year. With that adoption, we charge some of that what we consider non-capital equipment to the supply items. So if you notice on that same report, there's a negative amount in that line item. It's a journal entry moving those expenditures from supplies to non-capital equipment where they'll remain moving forward.
Thank you. We get those reports each month and they're very thorough, Mike, but that was just one that I didn't understand the switch in accounting. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so we will go on to action by consent. I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
If I could, before the motion, if I could just make a comment, there's a question that was asked regarding the professional learning contract that's in the consent agenda, and recognizing some of the concerns we have heard regarding social emotional learning as well as mental health. We are planning professional development series and some community engagement sessions in the coming weeks to address topics like social connections, anxiety and stress, resiliency, and having a growth mindset. So look forward to sharing more information about that in the coming weeks as we work on developing our programming.
Okay. Thank you for that additional detail. So I will entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
So I did the bills and claims this month. I'd like to thank Tracy LaFlemme for her help on this. It went really smoothly. We were able to do all of it over email. So it went very well. So I move approval of warrant number 1029799 through warrant number 1030246, totaling $19,338,654.62 for the period of November 17th, 2020 to December 21st, 2020, as well as items 7.02, 7.03, and 7.04.
Second, Kush.
Motion is second or heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Leong,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Yangroor,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kush.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay, so we will go on in our agenda to communications. Item 8.01, written communications listed in our board docs are our Freedom of Information Act request for your review. And so we'll go on to item 8.02, student ambassador reports.
All right,
I'd like to go first.
I think I'm gonna go first.
Okay, great, Shay.
So usually in the winter, we have a winter assembly, and this year, obviously we were unable to do it in school, but I just came from helping set up and seeing the beginning of a winter assembly that we are actually hosting at Naperville North in the parking lot. So that is pretty cool, and it was pretty well attended. And I think that's really a testament to the dedication of like all the staff members and everything to get at least a little bit of community engagement and a little bit of sense of normalcy. I think that manifests itself obviously through that event, but also through things like SOS training that we're working on and just finished with freshmen a couple weeks ago, and you know, meetings with counselors that like counselors are always looking to reach out for to younger students and stuff like that. And so the one thing that has jumped out over the last couple weeks is really the dedication that every staff member seems to have for every student in the building, and I think that goes through administration. And yeah.
Thank you, Shay. Thanks for that report about Naperville North. Okay, William.
All right, so I'm just going to report on a few things about Naperville Central, and then I was also asked to give a little bit of background on our experience this far into the school year with online learning. So first thing, early application college decisions for seniors have been coming out. Additionally, there have been no sports going on recently as ordered by the IHSA. Also, freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have been doing course selection online through school links at Central. And there is also an 8th grade orientation for course selection, and there will be an 8th grade orientation for extracurriculars as well, but that will be in January. Okay, so I'm also going to talk a little bit about just my experience and like some of my friends and peers' experience with online learning this far into the school year. So personally, for me as a senior, as well as a lot of my peers, it's been like pretty different now compared to, I guess, like just a few months ago. I think we've gotten significantly more used to the routine, I'd say, in terms of figuring out the schedule, like where to find like links for things, homework, assignments, slides, like everything has gotten substantially easier compared to earlier this school year. Additionally, in terms of social interaction, I think I've seen more like calling and like Zoom and stuff to like sort of replace that like peer-to-peer interaction than before, although obviously it would be far more preferable to be in person. I will say, however, that in terms of like the learning environment and just our learning situation, I do feel like we're learning a lot less than we normally do in person. And what I mean by that is, like, for example, my classes in general have seemed to be covering less ground per week. And also a lot of things such as like lectures and other sorts of like educational things like in class and out of class have been less effective. For example, I know that like sometimes when like cameras are off, I know that like some students like have been like sleeping or like they don't submit homework on time, like stuff like that definitely happens. And since I'm a senior, like I feel like my main priority has been college apps, so this hasn't been a huge effect on me. I know it is an issue for some students that I know in lower grades. So I would say like overall, in terms of like how we're coping with the learning environment, it's gotten substantially easier than it has before. I think it's just because there was like a curve, like a bump to get over. But I do think that in terms of like the quality of learning, it's definitely not the same.
William, thank you for those observations and for your report about Naperville Central. Shay, is there anything you wish to add from Naperville North in terms of the learning perspective as William did?
Sure. I think I agree with William. There definitely are. It's like often portrayed as resignation or complacency with online learning, but I feel like we haven't become resigned or complacent. We've just become accustomed to and made the best out of our situation. And so while it is tough and there are definitely things that we'd rather be doing in person, we have, alongside, teachers and administration and stuff, really moved a lot forward and made a lot of progress since the beginning of e-learning.
Thank you both for sharing that feedback with the Board of Education. Okay, we will go on in our communications to our superintendent staff school report. And I know that you are heading towards that 8.04 return to learn update.
That's correct. So I'll invite our technology team to please bring up our PowerPoint presentation this evening. Great, thank you. Okay, and then we will just go right to the next slide. This evening, the district administration will update the Board of Education and community on our implementation of our return to learn plan. While we continue to update and adjust our plan, our return to learn goals remain consistent. As educators, we recognize the great need for students to get back to in-person learning. Therefore, we as a committee set up 2 goals for our work, and the first was to develop a plan that can be responsive to changes in safety and health needs created by the pandemic, but also focus on returning students to in-person learning. Additionally, we focused on returning all students to in-person remote instruction, creating academic and social emotional conditions to promote continuing their education. This is a familiar slide to most of you who have been following these presentations. The slide contains an overview of the 4 stages of our return to learn plan. Currently, we're in the enhanced e-learning stage 2 of our plan. We expect to transition to stage 3 in the coming weeks and be at hybrid learning beginning the week of January 25th. I'll invite Dr. Igo to now take over.
As we've discussed previously, these are the 3 metrics we're monitoring to guide our decisions for in-person instruction. The health metrics continue to show a substantial level of community spread in both the county and District 203 community. However, our community metrics are trending down, with new cases per 100,000 down approximately 245 cases in 1 week, and the positivity rate falling within the high moderate range. We continue to see a low number of student and staff cases, with student cases remaining stable and staff cases seeing a significant decline. We're happy to report that we did not see the surge following Thanksgiving break as many other areas are reporting. We continue to have an adequate supply of PPE to provide in-person instruction. The significant drop in the number of staff who have tested positive and the stable number of staff who need to quarantine allows us to change the staffing metrics from the warning level to an adequate level for in-person instruction. The COVID dashboard has the most up-to-date data and can be found on our website if you would like to review. We have been utilizing the DuPage County Health Department Return to School framework that was released on August 28th to guide our decisions about how and when to provide in-person instruction. The framework is based on the best available evidence at that time from the CDC, which indicated that schools could reopen safely when there is a low level of community spread. The framework is built on the assumption that all mitigation strategies outlined by the Illinois Department of Health and the Illinois State Board of Education are in place and are not dependent on the level of community spread. The framework focuses on the disease activity levels across the county, utilizing both core indicators the CDC recommends for measuring community burden, as well as additional community spread measures. Based on the level of community spread, different learning models are recommended. In addition to those health metrics, the DuPage County Health Department also encouraged districts to consider other local metrics in their decision-making process. When we compare the DuPage County Health Department to the CDC framework, we see that there's a heavy reliance on metrics that evaluate the community spread and less of an emphasis on monitoring the ability to implement the key mitigation strategies that are listed. Since the release of the Return to School framework in late August, general knowledge of the virus has continued to grow and additional information has been gathered about how the virus impacts in-person instruction. We've been reviewing research as it's been released, consulting with districts who are providing in-person instruction, and reflecting on our own experiences with in-person learning to help inform our practices moving forward. Some of our big takeaways are that evidence continues to support that schools do not appear to be a focal point of the spread of the virus, even as the spread of the virus within the community grows. The evidence has continued to build that COVID poses a low risk to school-age children. We've noted that junior high and high school students are more likely to be diagnosed with COVID than our elementary students. Schools and childcare facilities have successfully reopened with strict adherence to mitigation strategies without the anticipated surge in the community spread. Community spread can be monitored using both of those CDC core indicators or just one of those indicators when paired with monitoring the implementation of mitigation strategies. And when reviewing what's needed for schools to reopen safely, schools need to be looking not only at the amount of community spread, but also the ability to implement and strictly adhere to those mitigation strategies. Since the spring, we have remained committed to our return to learn goals, which include ensuring a safe and secure learning environment. This summer and fall, we have worked to balance the risks of the virus alongside the risks of keeping our building closed. We now have more information about how to reduce the risk of the virus for both students and teachers, which informs our decisions as we continue to evaluate those risks of in-person instructions against those risks of remaining closed. Now that we have more information about how the virus spreads, what's worked for other districts and what's worked for us, we realize that we need to make the adjustments to our plan. Those adjustments include increasing our strategies that reduce opportunities for the virus to enter our buildings. We plan to do this by implementing the following: voluntary surveillance testing for all staff and for secondary students. Surveillance testing helps to identify and exclude individuals who may be asymptomatic, but but have enough of that virus in their system to spread it to others. This would not be diagnostic testing. We need to continue to build our capacity to quickly locate, notify, and quarantine individuals that have come in close contact with an infected individual. With this knowledge and the mitigation strategies mentioned, we will revise the health metrics we're monitoring to focus on the District 203 community, include at least one of the 2 CDC core indicators of community spread, and begin to look at our ability to successfully implement the key mitigation strategies. At the January 4th Board of Ed meeting, we will update you on our plans to increase these strategies. We know that there are many questions about why we are able to safely and successfully transition to a hybrid model now when the health department still is recommending 100% remote learning when it was not possible for us to do so in October. I think it's important to remember that in October, that was the first time our community and state had seen the virus spreading so quickly, with health metrics that were exceeding those from the spring when a stay-at-home order was issued. Given those circumstances, we believed it was best to follow the guidance of the health department until we could fully understand the impact of the surge on our ability to keep our schools safe and healthy for everyone. As we mentioned, since that time, we have learned more about the virus and how to best mitigate the transmission of the virus in our schools when community spread is high. With the addition of the surveillance testing and our efforts to increase contact tracing, we feel confident that we can keep the transmission of the virus low within our schools. During the adaptive pause, we have had students participating in in-person instruction and have slowly been increasing the number of students coming in. During that time, students and staff have successfully implemented the mitigation strategies, and we are not aware of any case transmission within our schools. Additionally, the holidays that typically bring large groups of people together will have passed, reducing the likelihood that there will be numerous large indoor gatherings once we return to school. Finally, our community metrics are trending downwards and doing so at a rapid pace, reinforcing our ability to maintain a safe and healthy learning environment. As I have talked about the importance of implementing mitigation strategies, I wanted to remind everyone of the strategies that we do have in place. They are focused around 4 big ideas: reducing opportunity for the virus to get into our buildings, providing precautions to limit the exposures within our buildings, maintaining a healthy environment by following increased hygiene and cleansing measures, and ensuring proper ventilation within all of our spaces. These strategies work together to slow the spread of the virus within our schools.
Earlier this month, we requested feedback from junior high and high school students, certified staff, and parents. The purpose of this feedback was to gain an understanding of aspects of the block schedule that were strengths and challenges. Unique survey links were delivered to these groups via Talk 203 with 45% student participation, 56% staff participation, and parent guardian participation ranging from 13 to 16% depending on the level. Unique survey links were distributed to manage over-responding, yielding a more accurate sense of individual group perceptions. Overall, the student sentiment towards aspects of the block schedule were positive. This was reflected both in item responses and open text questions. This slide summarizes relative areas of student perceived strengths, the block schedule supporting academic success, facilitating access to personalized academic support, allowing for a more active, independent, and responsible role as a student, and a less hectic school experience in general. Identified areas of weakness based on student response included no significant reduction in homework load, amount of screen time, less meaningful interactions with peers, and a limited feeling of connectedness and belongingness to school. With respect to staff feedback, on the whole, the sentiment about the block schedule was positive, as reflected in both feedback questions and open text responses. Identified strengths included the ability to provide personalized student support, greater ability to differentiate instruction, and use of varying instructional approaches, a greater capacity to develop key concepts given class length increase. Areas of relative challenge included student levels of work completion, variable student ability to remain engaged during longer periods of class. Parent guardian feedback was mixed concerning the block schedule. Identified strengths included increased ability to receive personalized academic support, increased depth of instruction, and more time for students to complete homework. Relative weaknesses identified here included limited peer interactions, difficulty with sustained engagement virtually across the school day, and limited break time between classes. As you know, we've asked parents and guardians to indicate their preference for in-person or remote learning for each student in their household using a unique link that was distributed last week via Blackboard. The window for responding with your preferences closes at the end of the day tomorrow. Please check your inbox, your trash, your junk, and your deleted folders and reply at your earliest convenience if you have not done so already. As of this afternoon, we have an elementary response rate of approximately 9%, with 70% of respondents endorsing in-person learning. Please note, however, that elementary parent guardians were asked to respond only if they changed their intention relative to what they preferred in the fall. We are aware that some families are submitting the same information as in the fall, impacting the reliability of these numbers. This will be cleaned once the window has closed completely at the end of tomorrow. Also, as of this afternoon, actually, I just looked at this a couple minutes ago, we have a secondary response rate now of 71%, with 74% endorsing in-person learning. As I said before, please continue to complete your students' registration status link. Again, that window closes in roughly 24 hours. Thank you.
The data that Dr. Knowlton shared was used in determining our stage 3 transition to hybrid learning. The priorities for stage 3 hybrid learning remain the same as first presented. During this stage, we will increase in-person instruction with the goal of getting 50% of students choosing in-person learning into the building on a daily basis. We are committed to the continuation of high-quality instruction, ensuring staff learning spaces for students and educators are safe, and providing students time to reconnect with their in-person peers. As we increase in-person instruction, we will leverage the hybrid learning model shared in October. In-person learning is always the preferred method of instruction for students. However, we know that during this pandemic, it has not made it possible for all to attend in person. We will continue to offer the online-only option. With 2 learning groups, hybrid and online only, there will be instruction happening for both groups throughout the day or week at the same time. Since our educators will be teaching in a blend of in-person and online instruction happening simultaneously, it will be a slightly different experience than students are experiencing now. Our entire staff is working hard and has adapted to the ever-changing landscape of instruction over the past 9 months, and we are confident that they will again shift with grace because of their dedication to students and their desire to ensure learning is maximized in all settings. This slide illustrates the hybrid learning structure for elementary, junior high, and high school students. Elementary students will attend synchronous learning following an AM and PM schedule for both in-person and online-only students. Students will also engage in asynchronous learning planned by the classroom teachers. All students will participate in art, music, PE, and learning commons lessons and activities. At the secondary level, we will continue to implement the block schedule with synchronous and asynchronous learning on Mondays. The block allows for cohorts of students to transition less throughout the day, which aligns with our mitigation strategy of decreasing the amount of student group mixing. This schedule also builds time in for teachers to support students individually and in small groups at the end of the day. Mr. Freund and Mrs. Posey will provide a greater depth of detail for each level as we move through our presentation this evening. This is an overview of our January calendar. We will run fully remote learning January 6th, 7th, and 8th. This is the same mitigation strategy we implemented after Thanksgiving and believe this increased our ability at keeping COVID spread out of our schools. January 11th as an e-learning day for all. Our staff will be back into the buildings on January 12th. And over the next 2 weeks, we will begin to transition students into the building to tour the schools, meet teachers, and become familiar with the health and safety protocols. Our full hybrid model will begin on January 25th for all students.
Looking ahead to January, our plans are to greatly increase the opportunities for in-person learning at each level, with opportunities to reacclimate to learning in school for those that are returning. The next several slides provide details on this transition back to school for early childhood and elementary students. The information on this slide has already been communicated to our early childhood families, but I'll share again tonight for the benefit of the entire community and the Board of Education. Our IEP students at the early childhood level have been provided in-person learning for weeks now. In January, early childhood students will all be fully remote the 3 days following winter break in alignment with the plan for all District 203 students. Then, starting the week of January 15th, IEP students at the early childhood level will increase to 4 days of in-person learning. Students in the Preschool for All program will begin their in-person learning with an alternating day schedule the week of January 19th, followed by our community early childhood students the week of January 25th. For elementary students, we will transition to our AM/PM schedule the week of January 25th. Dividing our students in half is necessary for a couple of reasons. First, this decreases the number of students in a classroom to ensure staff and students have the necessary space to socially distance 6 feet from one another whenever possible. Also, when there is a positive case of COVID, appropriate social distancing will minimize the number of individuals who would be required to quarantine. The AM/PM model also allows our teachers to provide in-person instruction in literacy and math, two subjects we believe are priorities for students to receive in person to the greatest extent possible. As this timeline shows, Mondays will be designated as e-learning days for all elementary students. The entire class will remain remote with the classroom teacher in the morning, just as it is now on Mondays. Beginning on Tuesday, January 26th, all elementary students will transition to the AM/PM schedule. Kindergarten students who would attend in person would return to school for a half day in the morning or in the afternoon. As this calendar segment shows, grades 1 and 2 will return on Wednesday, January 27th, and grades 3 through 5 return on Thursday, January 28th. This is an accelerated version of the transition plan we shared back in October. It allows our youngest learners to have focused attention from the entire staff, while also returning older grade levels in a cadence that we are confident we can do safely, so all elementary students are supported as they acclimate to a new school environment where social distancing, face masks, and frequent hand washing will be the new normal for the foreseeable future. This slide shows the daily schedule for our elementary students. To provide continuity for instruction, all elementary students will continue with their current teacher this entire school year. All students returning in person, whether AM or PM, as well as students who are continuing online only, will receive live remote instruction on Mondays from 8:15 to 10:45, just as they are currently. This opportunity to stay together as a class once per week is an important element to maintain relationships and classroom community. On Mondays, students will also have scheduled specials classes and assigned independent work beyond the 2.5 hours of learning in the morning. Students returning in person will attend school in the AM session, which is 8:15 to 10:45, or the PM session, which is scheduled from noon until 2:30 p.m., Tuesday through Friday. Students will be assigned to AM or PM sessions by the building principal. Although principals will maintain the AM/PM assignments that were created back in October as much as possible, elementary parents do have the option to make a switch from online to in-person or vice versa. Based on those changes that may be requested, specific AM or PM assignments could change from the fall, but will once again be based on several factors, including, but not limited to, busing, on-site childcare, special education services, and strategic grouping of in-person and online-only students. As mentioned, families also have the option of having their student attend online only. These students will follow the same schedule as their in-person classmates. They will continue with their same classroom teacher and access the classroom instruction via live streaming. We are requiring a commitment for online only through the end of the second trimester, which is scheduled for March 11th. The next couple of slides break down the elementary schedule by approximate minutes. Whether a student is attending in person or online only, the focus of their time with the classroom teacher will be literacy with integrated social studies, mathematics, and social emotional learning. This slide also illustrates the type of learning within each of the priority areas. I'd like to point out that this entire time will include live instruction from the classroom teacher for all students, along with opportunities for independent practice, which is very typical for elementary classrooms. So for example, students in kindergarten through second grade will spend about 75 minutes each day in literacy with their teacher. This includes direct instruction, but also independent level activities so students can practice and extend concepts and skills that they're learning. Additional learning will be scheduled outside of that 2.5 hours an elementary student attends with their classroom teacher. This will occur during what we call the remote learning part of the day. As shown on this slide, the remote learning portion of the day is a blend of independent learning, asynchronous or self-paced learning, and synchronous or live instruction. As this chart shows, scheduled lessons will also occur with the art teacher, music teacher, physical education teacher, and Learning Commons teacher on a weekly basis, with additional activities provided for students on the days they do not meet with those teachers. When we first discussed this in October, elementary students had not yet experienced much independent learning time in the remote setting. Since then, however, this has been the regular schedule on Mondays, with additional independent learning time integrated intermittently on Tuesdays through Fridays. This was deliberate to increase student independence, knowing our plan was to move towards the AM/PM model at a later date. Additionally, schools will have increased support for elementary learners during their remote learning time as we move into the AM/PM schedule. Classroom teachers will prepare students for the remote learning activities in advance, and assistant schedules will be set to prompt and check in with students during remote learning. To highlight the elementary day one step further, this sample schedule is provided to illustrate how a school day may look through a student's eyes. This particular sample shows a possible schedule for a student assigned to the PM session. Remember, this is just a sample. The chart on the right, which is shaded in blue, illustrates how an afternoon may be allocated with a focus on SEL, literacy, and math. Students attending online only would obviously not experience arrival with temperature checks or the dismissal time. The chart on the left demonstrates how the morning might unfold for a student assigned to the PM session. Notice there are scheduled or live lessons. This one happens to show PE and Learning Commons time with those teachers, while the other activities are shown with the number of minutes. These activities are self-paced and they could actually flex to any time of the day, really, including after 2:30 for a student assigned to the PM session. So this gives families who seek it some additional flexibility. Specific schedules vary by grade level and classrooms, so classroom teachers will share those specific schedules with families before we transition into the week of January 25th. Now I'll turn it over to Mrs. Posey, who will provide details for junior high and high school.
As we return to school in January and move into stage 2 at the junior high and high school levels, each building will initially increase in-person learning with the goal of inviting students to engage in transition activities for students new to each building. The goal, if health metrics allow, will be a target of 50% attendance for all students who choose in-person learning the week of January 25th. Based on the data collected and shared earlier this evening by Dr. Knowlton, all junior high and high school students will continue in a block schedule Tuesday through Friday, where they will attend less periods a day for an extended time. Mondays will continue to be an e-learning day for students, where they will engage in asynchronous and synchronous learning for all of their classes. The Monday schedule allows for an entire classroom community to interact one day per week, while the AB block schedule will allow for less students in classes when we are in person, fewer passing periods, and less changing of class groups to support our mitigation strategies. Each school will continue a process for providing targeted support for students who need extra help, who experience connectivity issues, to engage in project-based learning in labs, or are simply having a hard time engaging in e-learning. As was displayed in an earlier slide, at the junior high and high school levels, students will begin remotely when returning to school from winter break. As we enter the weeks of January 11th and 19th, students at all secondary buildings will continue to receive targeted support if needed and will be provided transition activities if they are new to the building they attend. Depending on the building, those transition activities could take place during any part of the school day and may include some after-hours tours and other events. For high school students, this includes the culmination of first semester, with preparation for any semester-ending assessments that may be planned. The week of January 19th will not include a different schedule for high school semester exams, as these will have a different look than in years past. As we move into the week of January 25th, we will begin to transition to an AB in-person schedule with up to 50% of students attending, depending on metrics allowance. This slide shows more detail what the week of hybrid will look like at the secondary level. The alpha split will be created and shared with families over the winter break, and will vary slightly per building as determined with the input of the choice data being collected this week from students and parents. Much time will be spent during this week with students, acclimating them to the health and safety procedures surrounding everything from entering and exiting the buildings, expectations during passing periods, including staggering releases from classes when needed, how to access the restrooms, eating and drinking expectations, and other building-specific details like directional hallways and securing belongings. Each building will have individual plans that are specific to their spaces, number of students returning, and their individual needs. There will continue to be access to grab-and-go lunches and breakfast each day in both the junior high and high school buildings. The process for this will be shared with families on when and where students will be able to eat and drink throughout the day. While water fountains are not accessible, the water bottle filling stations are still available for students and staff. Now let's review the specifics for the junior high student day. As previously outlined, they will begin with an e-learning day each Monday that follows a traditional 9-period day from 8 a.m. to 2:50 p.m., which will include both synchronous and asynchronous learning. Staff who need to invite students in person for learning have the flexibility to do so as it aligns to the Monday schedule. Tuesday through Friday, all students will attend a block schedule, 4 class period blocks each day beginning at 8:35 and ending at 12:50. Office hours are targeted for student support and are built into the end of each day. The block schedule decreases the number of times that students are passing through the halls and changing groups of students each day, assisting us in implementing our mitigation strategies. After the students' assigned lunch period, students resume working on asynchronous activities assigned by their teachers, receive additional support as needed, and finish their school day at 2:50. Online-only students attend school through live stream technology, allowing for continuous real-time synchronous and asynchronous learning as in-person learning is being implemented. AB students will log on through live stream instruction on the days they are not in the building. Throughout January and into February, we will be providing both remote and in-person learning that will assist in acclimating students and families to the new times and routines, becoming familiar with the health and safety guidelines, building relationships with staff and peers, and promoting autonomy for teachers with the planning and delivery of live stream synchronous and asynchronous activities. And now the specifics for the high school student schedule. As noted, they will also begin with an e-learning day each Monday that follows a late start schedule with an 8-period day from 10:25 to 3 p.m. During the Monday schedule, each student will attend every class synchronously at the regularly scheduled times for a check-in and various activities. Then staff members have the flexibility to keep students in the session for synchronous instruction, including limiting them to a smaller group for those students or classes that may need intervention or extension. Tuesday through Friday, all students will attend the block schedule, 4 class period blocks each day. Office hours for student support and collaboration are built into the end of each day, and students will have access to teacher support, small group learning, and student services assistance. The high school block schedule will follow an AB schedule. Tuesday, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be held. Wednesday, periods 6, 7, 8, and 5 in that order will be followed. This will then be repeated on Thursday with 1, 2, 3, 4, and again Friday, periods 6, 7, 8, 5. For example, a student whose last name is Barker would be in the A group and would attend in person Tuesday and Wednesday, but would live stream their classes on Thursday and Friday. This ensures that students follow a consecutive 2-day schedule that completes all 8 periods. Notice that in the schedule, most lunch periods, early releases, and late arrivals are built into the beginning and the end of the split days to accommodate for less students in the building by allowing those students to arrive late for classes or leave early when academics are completed. As with the junior high schedule, we will increase the number of high school students accessing the building for in-person learning as health metrics allow, with a target date of January 25th for 50% in-person attendance. During January, we are also hoping for an updated response from IHSA regarding athletics for the remainder of the year, and we'll share that information as soon as it arrives. Students at the junior high and high school levels will be offered grab-and-go meals at the beginning and end of each day. Again, buildings will provide specific and unique information on the processes for entering and exiting the building, accessing restrooms, eating and drinking procedures, and passing period protocols. As with the junior high, high school online-only students attend school through live stream technology, allowing for real-time synchronous and asynchronous learning as in-person learning is being implemented. AB students will log on through live stream instruction on the days they are not in the building. This means the students are responsible for daily attendance, whether in person or live streaming. Each week, teachers work within their PLC teams to discuss student progress, engagement, student mastery, and support that individual students may need. Counselors and administrators also monitor engagement through attendance, overall grades, and check-ins with students who are struggling in emotional areas. They then follow a process for inviting students to either in-person or virtual support with teachers or other staff to give assistance in areas they may be lagging. This could include support with projects or papers, assignments review, reteaching content or retaking assessments, counselor check-in for social emotional support, college and career discussion, credit and course selection review, or a host of other supports listed on the slide. Each student does not receive individual support from all teachers during the afternoon time slot every day. Just like in a typical school year, MTSS is designed to be responsive to student needs and can look different each day and for each student. However, teachers are working with students during this time on a daily basis, as this is the expectation for all of our educators. Dr. Igo?
Our students in the Connection program have been participating in in-person instruction using an AM/PM model. Students attend school Tuesday through Friday, and this will continue when we transition into our hybrid model. Our students with IEPs who are served in our specialized classrooms will transition from an alternating day hybrid model to attending in-person instruction 4 days per week for 4 hours each day. Students will continue to receive an hour of asynchronous instruction each day, as well as participate in remote learning days on Monday.
While we continue offering in-person opportunities for students that we've targeted over the last several weeks in January, we also have a few other groups that we wish to invite in for some transition activities as we approach that January 25th week of in-person instruction. At the elementary level, one of those groups is our kindergartners. They will be invited in with a parent to visit the school, visit their classroom in small groups. This will give some of our youngest learners a chance to experience things like arrival, hanging up their backpack, putting supplies in their desk, things that we as adults sometimes might take for granted, but our kindergarten teachers and our families know those are important pieces of navigating to a new school and into school in general. A similar opportunity for elementary students will be provided if they are new to their elementary school. These could be students in grades 1 through 5, and those will be individualized visits to make sure that those students also have an experience before their first day when they return in person. At the junior high and high school levels, transition activities will also be prioritized for our 6th grade, 9th grade, and transfer students at each building. This will provide opportunities for acclimation to the site, building of relationships with each other and the staff, creating a connectedness to the new school, and a familiarity with the mitigation strategies employed at specific buildings, which includes processes such as passing periods, eating and drinking, restroom breaks, and entering and leaving the building. If time allows, other groups may be invited in to familiarize themselves with the school staff and the new process for safety and health that will be implemented. Each school will be communicating their own unique plans for these activities prior to our return of students to schools the week of January 25th. All processes will be reviewed with every student as we return to school in the near future.
There have been many questions and concerns that students with IEPs and 504s are not receiving their services and that the district is no longer completing evaluations to identify students who might need services. I want to assure you that students are receiving the services that are outlined in their IEPs and 504s, although those services may be provided differently. The federal law that guides services explicitly states that services may be provided in a virtual environment. This was provided to us even prior to our pandemic. Additionally, the Office of Special Education has provided guidance to all school districts that IEP services must be provided consistent with the need to protect the health and safety of students with IEPs and the individuals providing those services. During our school closures last spring, over the summer and this fall, evaluations to determine eligibility for IEP or 504 services has continued. This includes preschool screenings and referrals that may be made from teachers or parents. Again, the process may look different, but the evaluations are occurring, and when needed, assessments are being conducted in person. Federal law requires that all special education services are individualized and aligned to the unique needs of that student. In order to meet this mandate and to prioritize our students with IEPs for in-person instruction, all IEP teams began the year by reviewing each student's progress towards their IEP goals and grade level standards following the school closures in the spring. Based upon this review, teams made recommendations and changes to the types of services each student may need to meet their annual goals. These recommendations could have included providing in-person instruction, increasing their service minutes, or making changes to when or how those services are provided. If families have concerns, I urge you to contact your student's case manager to discuss in more detail. The IEP team will be able to explain the decisions that were made in the fall, and if appropriate, make adjustments based upon your concerns. Prior to our transition to the hybrid schedule, families will be receiving one schedule that outlines when all special education and related services will be provided. The schedule will be provided to you by the case manager no later than January 25th.
As shared in the past, the live stream technology is the backbone of our hybrid learning model. The technology allows for us to move from stage 1 to 2 and 3 in a fluid manner. Teachers will communicate with all students when live instruction will occur. All classrooms have been equipped with the necessary technology, and some teachers have been using this as they have been bringing students into the buildings. Like every new resource, new curriculum, and a shift in practice, it will take some adjustment for all as teachers and students get acclimated to this new model of stage 3.
The community will be continue to be updated about our return to work plan via our Talk 203 system, social media outlets, as well as website updates at naperville203.org/return to learn. The COVID-19 dashboard is updated weekly and the frequently asked questions after each board meeting. During the month of January, we will be sending many reminders about our health and safety protocols in preparation for the transition to in-person learning. And with that, we would be happy to answer questions. Oh, I got one more slide, sorry. Just again, our goals were to develop a plan that allows us to be flexible and responsive to changing conditions and ultimately return to full in-person and learning as it is safe to do so. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Okay, so I want to thank our administrative team for this very detailed Return to Learn presentation. Our community has expressed many questions and concerns during our public comments. Some of these have been answered in our presentation and some will be addressed by the Board of Education's questions. However, as a reminder, our superintendent will also address these questions in the frequently asked questions on our website. So many of our community members have also sent questions to the Board of Education by email, and we want to thank our community for their efforts to express their comments and concerns. This is a vital part of ensuring that their concerns are addressed. As a reminder to our community about our own Board of Education process, the board submits many questions ahead of the presentation so that answers to the questions from the community can be addressed as a part of the presentation. We also reflect many of these questions during our question and answer period. Please know how much we value your communication. In the beginning of January, our district administrators and the Board of Education will be meeting individually with the home and school and SFCP leadership of each school to hear the specific concerns of each school community. This feedback will inform our efforts to develop specific student and parent supports. We will now begin the board's question and answer period. I see Janet's hand.
Hi, thanks. Thank you for the presentation. Had a lot of good detail, and I think it's obvious you've been trying to be very responsive to a lot of the concerns that have been brought up. In the past month or so, I've talked to probably a few hundred parents at this point, and the feedback I've gotten really does reflect like kind of that 70% of families wanting to be back in school. But I do have to say that that 70%, it's not like a slam dunk, yes, we want to be back. It's more, it's a lot of, I hear a lot of people with still worries that are, weighing a lot of decisions and saying that they, at the end, trust us to put their students in school safely. And so, I just have a few questions that are going to kind of revolve around that kind of that safety management and kind of that risk mitigation. So at this point, we have we have experience with a population of students who have been going into schools. Can you maybe can someone talk to us about where we've been seeing issues with maybe self-monitoring compliance, compliance with mask wearing, compliance with social distancing?
Sure, I can certainly start to take those questions, and others, if Chuck or Stephanie would like to jump in. In regards to just the symptom monitoring, we have not seen a whole lot of non-compliance with that. Of course, every once in a while, a student will show up with symptoms and we might need to place them into the health office and have a parent come and pick them up. That's not something that is being reported that is happening consistently kind of over time, generally speaking. In regards to kind of mask wearing, we have had significant compliance with that, as well as social distancing to the greatest extent possible. Obviously, we do have some students that aren't able to do that as well and need lots of reminders. But generally speaking, we have not seen a lot of concerns in that area either.
Where we don't see the compliance, can you just give a sense to parents for how their students will be kept safe in those instances?
In terms of if somebody isn't socially distancing, is that?
Or someone who just won't wear a mask, like how do we typically manage that?
Oh, sure. So when we are working with our student that is struggling to wear a mask, we are definitely working and teaching students how to do that. There's definite direct instruction and skills that are happening. We also kind of isolate that student during that time, and we provide additional kind of PPE. So our students might be asked to wear their face shields at all times if there's a student in the room that is refusing to wear their mask for medical reasons or another reason. But generally speaking, we have not seen that happening. Our students, we've been working very hard with students and families. We've connected with families to help us get to where we need to be by increasing tolerance. We've activated our BCBAs, our behavior analysis, our behavior specialists, who know how to kind of set things up and provide that reinforcement so our students are able to do that when necessary.
I could just ask Chuck or Stephanie, maybe talk a little bit about, I think Dr. Igo's response addressed a lot of our students perhaps in some specialized programs. Let's talk about mask refusal for somebody who doesn't have a medical or other reason, just in terms of how we will address that.
Yeah, sure. I can start. I'd like to say first that we've actually seen very little, if any, of that. For the most part, for our youngest learners, it's had to do with the fit of the mask. So sometimes our little guys are coming with masks that might be a little bit too big for their face, and maybe that works at home or maybe even out in the community. But certainly having a fitted mask for the size of the child is really important. So I would encourage our families to really look at that before sending their elementary and our early childhood student back to school. In those cases, we've been able to provide a child-size mask and send those home with the family too, and the compliance has occurred, immediately the very next day. So that's how we've dealt with that so far.
The compliance at the secondary level is also very high, with very little issues in the junior high or high schools. We also have extra masks that are available for students should they need one that should it break or something else that would occur. But students will be expected to be masked unless they have a medical reason not to. And those students would be, as Dr. Igo said, isolated from the rest of the group and be encouraged and retaught how to wear those masks. And we would also be talking to parents to make sure that they reinforce that at home for us as well.
Yeah, and just to emphasize here, our first priority would be to partnership with students and parents in terms of the importance of understanding that mitigation strategy. But at this time, the reality is it's a mandated requirement by the State Board of Education and throughout the state. So in these spaces, they will be required to wear masks. And if it's an outright behavior refusal to wear a mask, then those students are going to have to be placed unilaterally into the online program.
Okay. That's very helpful. And, it also sounds like we have some more maybe site-specific guidelines, safety guidelines coming out soon. At the same time, I believe we need to, our families are making decisions by tomorrow. So can I ask, as parents are kind of weighing those decisions, will they, once those standards come out, will they, if they see the standards and they maybe are uncomfortable with it, or their students experience those practices in place in person and are uncomfortable, will they be able to change their minds and go back to online?
We're asking for as much of a commitment as possible, but we understand that throughout this whole process, we've asked for flexibility and understanding. We will work with those on a case-by-case basis. And again, with the information, just the detailed information of our plan coming out today, we recognize some families still may have questions. They should reach out to their building principal to maybe help answer some of those questions. Check our website. There's a lot of information. There's some of the questions that we've been getting from parents are things that are addressed in either our FAQs or return to learn plans, or even videos that we've posted regarding safety mitigation standards and just some of the practices that we'll have in place. But we do recognize the need to have to be somewhat flexible here, but we do need the information so that we can begin our planning.
All right, great. And that was, I think that was my last question was if they have more site-specific questions, where should they go? And it sounds like the principal is probably the best place to start. Okay, thanks.
Okay, I saw Joe's hand and then I see Paul's.
Yeah, thanks. Very informative presentation. I guess mine kind of piggyback a little bit on Janet's. Regarding students who, for example, have to quarantine or test positive once they return to school, what would the process be? Would they be able to slip right into an online learning situation for that period of time during quarantine? And at the elementary level, is the online only happening in one of the two periods? So say somebody's in a PM schedule, and I think before only one of the two AM or PM was going to be online learning. Would they have to switch to the other schedule for that period?
I'll take the first part and then ask Chuck to speak to the second part. First part is, one of the benefits of the live stream equipment that we've installed into our classrooms and the structure that we've put in place of that simultaneous instruction that would allow a student who maybe has to quarantine for a period of time to be able to still access curriculum content online. Chuck, talk a little bit about the other part of the question.
Yeah, sure. I understand the question was regarding a student who is in person but may need to quarantine. Will they have to be assigned to an AM or a PM? Generally speaking, Mr. Kuzminski, each classroom has the online only students grouped in the AM or the PM, and that will vary by school. That will vary by grade level. So in a situation where a student might have to quarantine, the teacher and the principal will work with that family to see if, in fact, that child can slide into the session that has the online students. If not, a family would not be forced to change from AM or PM, and could live stream in, so to speak, with the same students that they were attending in person, again, for that period of 10 or 14 days.
Great, thank you. And then in terms of the district COVID dashboard, is there any move to break this out by elementary, junior high, and high school so that families kind of know the levels in each kind of grade level?
Yeah, I think that's something we have to revisit as a team, especially as we're nearing that date of the time, for return. But we will have a look at that and consider some other options.
Thank you. I have some other questions, but I'll let Paul go now.
Okay, great. Paul?
Thank you for the presentation. Very detailed. I've been asking questions for months, as have many other parents and concerned students and so forth. And the frequent answer has been, that's the way the DuPage County Board of Health recommends it. And I heard your explanation for why we are changing this in some ways. And I find it both shocking and disturbing. Could you please tell us who we're listening to now so that we can follow it ourselves and have some idea of what's guiding our decision making? And try to help restore my faith in the process.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mr. Leong. Yes, there are a number of agencies that we have to take input from, and I think some of what's got us to the point where we are right now is just, again, some of the evidence that continues to support that schools are not right now the places that are the focal point of the spread of the virus. Again, continued evidence that it poses a little risk and low risk to school-age children. And just understanding better about some of the mitigation strategies that we're able to put into place now effectively. The current state of where we're at right now with our numbers across the county. Again, we're looking at a period of time a month away. At one point, all 6 of the county's indicators were in the substantial community spread. As of today, 2 of them are no longer in the substantial spread, and all the others are trending downward. When we break down then looking within our own zip code in the county too, again, we're seeing everything trending in a very positive direction, positive in terms of numbers going down to support more comfortably a return to learn. And I think, again, one of the big things is that, lessons that we have learned, coupled with, additional mitigation strategies, being better about contact tracing, being more efficient and quicker about contact tracing, and now being able to look at the idea, we health department has, has some concerns regarding things like surveillance testing because it's not diagnostic. So, you can't use it as a guaranteed positive or negative. It has to, any indicator of a potential positive has to be followed up with the diagnostic test. But again, having those mitigation strategies, we feel comfortable now that as we transition into the end of January, we'll be able to mitigate any spread. I'll ask any of the team that there's anything that you'd wish to add to that.
Paul, did you have additional questions?
Again, I didn't hear a single source that we're following, because in the past we heard about the single source, the DuPage County Board of Health. I'm now hearing we have empirical evidence as well as a variety of sources. Could you share some of those so that we can follow them ourselves?
Sure. In addition to the DuPage County Health Department, we're following Illinois State Board of Education, the Illinois Department of Public Health, CDC. Dr. Igo, any additional sources?
No, those are the major ones that we're following, and I think maybe a piece that might maybe add to that would be that as we're thinking about and we're reading all the different research and pulling all the pieces together, it's more about the fact that the evidence is continuing to mount. It's not that there's these brand new pieces of evidence every time, but the evidence is continuing to mount and support that this is the right way to go. I think it's important to remember that we've got studies that are coming out from everywhere, but they're not over large groups of students or staff. So you have to kind of look for kind of trends in that data. And we are seeing the trends in the data to be able to support the decisions that we're making.
Thank you. I mean, it just seems somewhat arbitrary or is there some suggestion that the superintendent and his staff have become epidemiological experts and they're the ones to decide when to follow the DuPage County Board of Health and when not to?
No, Mr. Leong, the recommendation, from the DuPage County Health Department gives us the ability to look more locally at metrics and issues within our own districts. And on a call today with them, looking at, for example, hospitalizations, case counts, and things like that, as we, in October, delayed, it's a sharp rise and a sharp increase in the community spread. Okay, so then we look within our own school district boundaries and see that our numbers are following that trend. We're at a point right now that as we continue to trend in the correct direction, we can make different choices. As we learn and understand more about how the virus is spread and how to mitigate it within the schools, we can make different choices.
Thank you.
Questions from the board? Donna.
Thank you for that detailed report. I know my first question is just going to turn into a comment because it's already been answered as far as getting additional information. We talked about our website and the principals, but also I just want to thank you for the email that went out, the Talk 203 that went out on Thursday, giving parents all the links to our Return to Learn plan and the videos and the things that are important, because I think that anytime they can have the information at their fingertips, the better off they are. So thank you for that. We talked about, I think Jane spoke about the technology that's involved with teaching in a classroom with students in person and live streaming. And I know that I've asked this in the past, but I know that more has happened since then. So I want to ask it again. What professional development has been provided to staff to support teaching in person and learning simultaneously to remote learners that are live streaming?
Sure, thanks, Donna. So it's back in October when we first were planning on moving to this model. First of all, we worked with IT to make sure that we could get all of the equipment into all of our classrooms, which we successfully did. Our first step was setting up a test classroom within PSAC, where our learning support coaches, our administrators, and also our CSAs could come and test out the equipment. Then what we did is we actually went into classrooms and tested it with teachers. So we would, live stream a classroom. We did it in a first grade classroom. We did it in a sixth grade classroom. We did it in a fourth grade classroom. We did it in a preschool classroom with actually the educator teaching. We also did it in high school and with some of us offsite, so that we would go through and say, okay, what's the best equipment for the first? So the first piece was just making sure we had the right equipment with teacher input of what was was the iPad better? Was the Chromebook better? What was better for their ease of use? And then after that, we worked closely with the learning support coaches to create the professional learning that teachers would need. And that has been ongoing. So that really hasn't stopped, because once that equipment got within our classrooms in October, and then in the high school, it was a little bit later, more in November, our teachers have been using this equipment. So the more equipment, so they could, during a Zoom, they could spotlight something for a student using an additional device. So it hasn't been that they necessarily have gone live with all of their kids, having some students within the classroom and some at home, but they have been utilizing the equipment. The other piece is, as we have been bringing in some of our students into that 10%, some of our teachers have been using it. So as they have 2 or 3 students within the classroom, they have been live streaming to the students at home. So it looks different than just a typical everybody on Zoom, because it's going to be a different experience. So we have provided some scripted professional learning, but I think the best professional learning has been from our teachers using it, getting in there in real time and troubleshooting the equipment. And we are fortunate that our teachers are pretty tech savvy. And so they're used to using the laptop and the iPad at the same time and an arm. So it will still be a learning curve for all of us, and our students will have a different experience at first until we all get comfortable. But it is something that they're ready for and that they have had learning around.
Great, thank you for that, Jane. I think that that's a concern of parents who are considering weighing both options. I think early on I heard that it was a concern of educators, and so it's something that, you know, it's new. Everything, there's a lot's new. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Dr. Igo, I heard us talk about how we are, you know, meeting the needs of our IEP students. It may look differently. I guess this is more of a comment as well, but I just want to make sure that it's heard, you know, publicly and by everyone. I think that if there was a need for additional staff to meet the needs of IEP students, I'm hoping that that would be brought to us through not necessarily you directly, Dr. Igo, but through Dan Bridges as well. But that's not something that we've heard of, but I'm assuming that if there was a need, we would be hearing that, correct?
That is correct. I certainly would have brought that through Mr. Bridges.
Great, thank you so much. And then I also heard mention of, as we're talking about mitigation strategies, that we're working on surveillance testing and that more details are going to come. When is that due to so that parents who have questions in regard to surveillance testing and teachers who have questions in regard to surveillance testing, when is that something that we'll hear more about?
January 4th board meeting. Dr. Igo and I were on the phone today with the service, talking a little bit more in detail. Our council is working with their council right now on finalizing a contract. Expect to have that for the January 4th meeting. We have to run a pilot to ensure that some of the labeling is able to be read, and then work on, you know, kind of some of our logistics on being able to deliver that. And the hope would be that it would be in place by the time January 25th rolls around.
Great, thank
if
you.
not shortly thereafter.
Okay, great. Thank you for that too, for pursuing that and for bringing that to us a little ahead of time, you know, ahead of your schedule, just so that we can have some confidence in the ability to, you know, parents who are concerned about sending their students back. Thanks. I have a few more, but I'll waive my time to the next board member.
Questions from the board? Oh, Christine, sorry, I couldn't see your hand.
Just some questions and maybe just a little follow-up or clarification on the safety protocols from that slide. And it's mostly around the healthy environment. So I'm thinking about school buses. Those are somewhat small spaces in the grand scheme of things. How are we going to maintain, or at least peace of mind for parents who will be sending their kids on buses? What's going to be in place there?
Certainly. So our students will certainly be wearing masks when they ride the bus, that they will have assigned seats on the bus whenever possible. If they have to buddy up, that we're going to try to, or put two people in a seat's probably a better way to say that. We're going to try to match them with somebody in their household. Having the windows down whenever possible will also be part of our process.
And like, what about cleaning? Will they be cleaned like after like the morning kids are dropped off, and then how often will that happen?
I believe they are cleaned after every route, but I'm going to ask Chuck for a little bit of help on that.
Yeah, that's accurate. They're actually going to disinfect after each run. So after the high school run, after the middle school run, after the elementary run.
Okay, and we're okay on staff to do that thoroughly. And I know there's quick turnaround times between, you know, getting the high school kids there and then getting the younger kids there. We're good on that.
Yeah, actually that was part of the scheduling with the three different levels to make sure that there was time for that to occur.
Okay, and then on the same train of thought with the buildings, so we'll clean after the morning kids leave and then clean again after the afternoon kids.
Yeah, that's right. So our buildings and grounds department actually did some test runs way back in the summertime when we were considering an AM/PM schedule possibility to make sure that there was enough time in between. So they're using actually and maybe Mr. Francis can help me here, but they actually have a disinfectant tool that they use that it is kind of an e-mist machine to do that, not only efficiently, but actually highly effectively, because it provides a clear layer that goes across the surfaces and actually around the surfaces as well.
That believe, just to add to that, that is a video that we have available, so families can actually see how the machine works and how we clean within those classrooms should they have any questions or concerns.
And that's in the FAQ section. They can find that.
Actually, it's on the home page of our website. At the very bottom are current 3 videos that we have for Return to Learn, but they can also find it on the Return to Learn web pages, which is naperville203.org/Return to Learn.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, was that all your questions, Christine? Okay, questions from the board. I see Charles, yes.
Hi. First of all, as others have said, thanks for the detailed report, really appreciate it. And it's interesting, so my comments come in exactly the perfect time because Christine, I was going to tag on to some of yours, and Seneca, thanks for sharing. I had the chance to look at the videos that you guys have posted. I think that they're really, really well done. I was going to actually suggest that if we could maybe at an upcoming board meeting, or as new videos come out, kind of share them, because I think they're tremendous resources. And, you know, with so much this being done, I think it's an opportunity to share those a little bit more broadly, because a lot of times folks are getting a lot of their information about what's happening, as you can tell from public comment, by observing these meetings. And so it'd be great to then show folks these videos. There's a video on the buses, there's a video on all the cleaning procedures around that. I think it really would help, because the things that I'm hearing as well around folks who have some hesitancy around what the policies and procedures are going to be. Folks want to get the kids back in school, obviously, but then it's like, okay, they're back in school, so now what? What are we going to do? And so I think that these videos do a really nice job of setting some peace of mind. And if for some reason they don't, they can help hone in the questions that we're getting. So I would encourage us to the work's been done in terms of these cleaning procedures are very thorough, and I think the videos are very well done. So I would encourage us to do that. Kind of to that end, are we planning any, whether that be video or other content, to help walk parents through as we transition back to this in terms of stage 1, stage 2, really trying to help the parents understand not just procedurally what's going to happen, but some information in terms of how parents can supplement what's going to be happening in terms of the differences in the way learning is going to look, similar to kind of, or anything that we've learned from what we did in terms of all remote, but now in this hybrid model, where parents can supplement what's going to be happening in terms of what the teachers are doing with the students as well. Have we considered any of that? Because I know there's a lot of questions I've heard around some of that from parents in terms of how to partner as effectively as possible with what our instructors are already doing.
Seneca, please.
Something that's on the radar?
Yeah, I'll start off from a communications perspective. We plan on rolling out almost daily, starting January 6th, sort of reminders, the videos, the symptom monitoring, reminding parents that their kids should be, practicing wearing their masks, all these things to sort of walk towards that January 25th, and just providing as much information as possible. I know that the elementary schools in particular have their own sort of back to school videos, and those are also posted on our Return to Learn pages. And that helps, an individual third grader see what their school looks like. And all of that communication coming from both the district, but really at the school level as well.
One of the things that might be helpful, or I don't know if we've considered almost like we have PLCs, right? So those are professional learning communities. Have we ever considered PLCs like parent learning communities where, we can either help facilitate or encourage parent-to-parent communication or best practices or things like that? I know that there's some of that happens naturally, I'll put it. But, for certain things, or messages that would be helpful to communicate and convey, is that something we've considered or are we considering currently?
I am considering a parent communications task force that I'd like to start trying to get mobilized here in January for that very purpose, help sort of spread that message. I don't want it to necessarily just be, let's say social media influencers, but people who can help spread that word and can continue to help spread the sort of the consistent messaging, but also accurate messaging. Like if a parent comes to them and says, I have a question, they could direct them to the Return to Learn site and those sort of areas. So stay tuned. I'm trying to get that off the ground.
Well, let me just say, it doesn't surprise me that you guys are already thinking about that. So nice work there. And then the last question / comment is really around, just to see if I understand, the comment was, or question was asked earlier around the decision criteria. If I can paraphrase what I heard, just so for clarity, that there are a number of different resources or a number of different agencies that are checked in with, and then there's kind of not a pure algorithm, but because the situation's fluid and dynamic, those things kind of converge. And then we look at not only the macro trends, but the trends that are happening in order to make the decision around safety. And then some of the things that have happened since is, plans around testing, what we've seen in terms of the data that continues to build, but then also what's happening in the community, and not only the magnitude, but the direction of the trends. And all those things are things that are considered that give us confidence that, coming up in a couple of weeks here, we'll be good to go with moving forward on our plan.
That's an excellent summary.
Accurate?
That's an excellent
Thank
summary.
you. Just want to make sure I had it clear. Thank you.
Okay, I will go ahead with a couple of questions, and thank you for paraphrasing, Charles. I was planning to attempt something similar, so thank you for that. I do also want to add to that what kind of experience we're hearing about, and I know we'll hear more about the testing at our next board meeting, but how that testing is influencing our ability to mitigate disease spread. And what we've heard, I know we don't know exactly, but what we've heard from other school districts who are employing it in terms of how that will impact our ability to mitigate there and our confidence in undertaking in-person learning safely.
Yeah, I'll say a couple of things, and then if there's anything Dr. Iga wants to add. I think one of the most reassuring things that has come to fruition from some of the districts who had started testing early is that they've proven to show over time considerable accuracy with the test that's being implemented compared to just kind of what's initially thought about it. That it has been more accurate. I think the other thing is that again it underscores the idea that the spread is fairly well contained among the kids, or small among the kids, higher among our adults, and so that's why we said part of it will include our staffing. So those I think are a couple of things. Logistically, they do it differently in different districts. Differences among elementary districts versus high school districts or unit districts. But I think it just based on the conversations that we have had, I feel confident that we'll have a system in place that will really help us, be able to an early indicator, early warning in terms of just how we're going to be able to mitigate or limit close contacts. Christine, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I think probably all of those things, and I think kind of just the science behind the idea that 10 to 20% of the people that have the virus are responsible for spreading it to 60% of people. So what the surveillance testing does is allow us to get those people who have a really high viral load that are more likely to be spreading it, and making sure we can isolate them and make sure they don't bring that into our schools. So knowing that we're going to have that kind of ability to manage, I think it's really helpful to us thinking in terms of how are we mitigating and what's making us feel very comfortable in kind of moving forward.
And I know that we are continuing to work with DuPage County, and is that something that as they're monitoring these school districts that have undertaken this, that is giving them additional confidence in terms of individual school districts' ability to go forward even during a time of substantial spread?
I think one of the concerns that the health department has expressed is they don't have the bandwidth or the manpower right now to be able to support districts in this testing protocol. And understanding the difference between a surveillance and a diagnostic, and not inaccurately using one for the wrong thing. So they have indicated willingness to be able to help set up protocols and things that need to be in place prior to testing. So again, I think, they know that the surveillance testing isn't the more accurate of the type of testing, the diagnostic, and so it's kind of with caution proceed as long as you have certain protocols in place.
Thank you. All right, I want to go to social and emotional needs. So again, that is something that we are greatly concerned about for students: isolation, depression, losses from the pandemic, losses from remote learning, all the different kinds of things that kids of all ages are grappling with. And I know that you are working on supports for that. Can you, I know you mentioned in terms of the professional learning that we just talked about. Can you give our parents any kind of idea towards what kind of assistance you may be able to help them with in terms of supporting their students, as well as looking at that peer-to-peer connection? In Dr. Knowlton's presentation, he mentioned that both parents and students rank that kind of low, that peer-to-peer connections. And I know that going back to school will increase a lot of that, but the block schedule is fewer periods. And so, how are we also hearing that feedback from the survey and making plans to increase that wherever we can? So parents was my one part, and then peer-to-peer was my other.
Yeah, first regarding parents, I'd ask parents that if your child is struggling social emotionally with mental health issues, please reach out to a building administrator, social worker, counselor, someone who can provide support specifically to you. As I indicated earlier in the presentation, we are working on a series of things to help our community members understand how to deal with anxiety, stress, resiliency, and some other factors. So we'll hopefully announce more about that as we're coming into January. And so make sure that definitely there's a relationship with the school to understand what those needs are. Yes, we anticipate some of the anxiety regarding social interaction, and limited social interaction should begin to mitigate as we bring more students back in. So Christine, Chuck, I don't know if there's anything that you'd add.
Yeah, I think probably one of the things I'd want to just kind of remind our community, we had talked a lot about it last year and maybe over the summer. And as we kicked off the year, is that we spent a lot of time with our teachers at the end of last year and over the summer talking about an acute trauma, and that all of our students have had an acute trauma. Honestly, everybody that's, all of us are experiencing acute trauma. And we provided them with some really professional learning related to how do I identify for myself what this trauma has done for me, and how do I set up my classroom to best meet the needs of kids who are also experiencing trauma. And again, at the beginning of the school year, we put a big, heavy focus on social emotional learning and had teachers really say, spend the first 3 to 4 weeks focusing on that piece before diving deep into your curriculum and building those things and using those things that we have taught you around how do you respond to kids who are experiencing trauma. So I don't want to lose that kind of as we continue to move forward, that those are things that we have done and things that we have put in place and that continue to be in place kind of as we move forward. We've also got some of our specialists really working specifically around trauma and created a very kind of a protocol on what we can do when we've got kids who are experiencing more significant trauma based upon this, and how to respond and how to bring together a team of experts to be able to help that student move forward. But again, I want to also reiterate what Mr. Bridges said in regard to, we believe that we're catching kids and we're doing what we can. If we aren't, we need you to come to us and say, although it appears that they're handling things well in your Zoom call or here, this is what's happening at home and I'm very concerned, because we will be able to respond.
I heard lots of great things there. I just want to reiterate individual concerns. You've got lots of resources but we've got to hear from parents. But that other part of like the more broad support that we know all kids need, we've been working on in the classrooms. We have plans to assist parents with support as we go forward. We know that there will continue to be needs as we are going on into our next semester, whether, going back in person as well, there will still continue to be those needs that we're recovering from this trauma.
Absolutely. And we are definitely working from a mindset of we're going to have kids who are more anxious. That's a natural part of what is going to happen. And the things that we do to respond to kids who are anxious, predictability, expectations, building those all of those are the things that we're doing to help reduce some anxiety for kids, as well as all of the things we teach in our SEL curriculum will continue to be appropriate here. What do I do when I'm feeling anxious? What are the steps that I take, and how do I implement those steps? Will we continue to be taught?
Wonderful. Thank you for that review. Okay, my next question is with regard to attendance. What are we seeing? We've had some questions about, attendance in terms of, students logging on, and what do we do when we have students who are, not logging on, whatever age that may be, if it's a very young age, if it's an older age, how are we addressing attendance? What kinds of things are we seeing?
Chuck or Stephanie?
Sure, I'll start this time, Chuck. at the secondary level, attendance rates are actually very, very high. When we see issues with students who are maybe attending, who are logged in, but maybe not as engaged as they should be, we have counselors and our deans at the high school level and APs at the junior high level who are reaching out to parents and students, checking on them, making sure that they understand that part of the process is not just logging in, but also being engaged in the work and reaching out for support and collaborating with your peers and your teachers. So they keep a pretty close eye on that.
Yep, thanks, Stephanie. And I would add at the elementary level, the primary difference maybe is we have attendance teams because we don't necessarily have all those layers. So on a regular basis, an administrator, the school social worker, and the nurse are typically sitting down and looking a lot more frequently now that we're in this remote learning phase at how students are doing, whether that's that they're intermittently coming in and out of Zooms or they're coming in late each morning or whatever that may be. So they're the ones that are, after the teacher has already reached out and spoken with the parent, now reaching out and creating plans and making sure that that child has wraparound services if it's something above and beyond just a technology issue.
And is that true in EC as well? You mentioned elementary. I'm thinking you're combining those together, but I just wanted to verify.
Yes, it is true in EC as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right. I have additional questions, but I will hold them and I will I see Donna's hand. Any additional board members with questions? Okay. I'll go to Donna.
Thanks. All right. So part of my question piggybacks off of, Kristen's. Actually, I have two questions that I'm going to pose for a later date because I think that right now our most important priority is getting kids back into the classroom starting the week of January 25th or some of the early transitions, getting them back in the classroom in January. So things that are on my mind that I'd like to understand after we get them back into the classroom. So a heads up on this for the staff. Instructional minutes. I want to better understand instructional minutes and our change in instructional minutes from last year to the beginning of this year to now to the moving to hybrid. I just want to better understand our transition and where we're at with that. I don't need that answer now because I really just want to get us back in the classroom. Kristen asked about attendance. I'd like to understand if that has changed over, I'm more the numbers person, so I just want to understand if that has changed over time as we've gotten further into remote learning. And again, maybe that's not going to be as important because we're going to be moving into in-person. So I want to those are things on my mind that I want at some point to get. All right, my first question then. As I read through and prepared for the meeting, I had lots of questions in my head around the block schedule feedback. And so I reached out to the office today and asked, can I get more detail on this, number detail on this? And I'm sure the community wants to understand that better. And I think I had a great response, but I'd like that to be shared with the community if you can.
We have a link in the slide deck that takes you right to the 4 dashboards that correspond to staff feedback, parent junior high, parent high school, as well as student feedback. So that shows you kind of the distribution of responses to some of the selected response questions, and that's all in there.
Okay, so there's more number in there than, I haven't had a chance to go back and look at that yet. So there's more of the actual data in there.
The actual graphs, yes, correct.
Great, perfect. Thank you for that, because I think that transparency is important to our community and to me. My next question, so I heard a little discussion from Paul and Charles, the what we've learned slide. I have to commend you, because I know in my own head and reading, and reading through research, back since March, even before March, all the way through to now, for every article I could find on one topic of, whether or not we could go back into the school classroom safely, I'd find another one saying that kids are spreading. I'm still seeing that. So I agree that it has just, with Dr. Igo, who said that, I believe, make sure I'm right on this, Dr. Igo, that evidence is now just beginning to mount. And I've seen the same thing in the last few weeks that it's just mounting now. And I know that those ideas were out there, but it's just now becoming more evident with lots of different resources all coming to the same conclusion. And that's what's kind of changed. Is that correct? Am I making sure? Because I know from what I'm reading, but is that what you're reading too, administration?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly take the lead on that, but other people can jump in, but that's exactly what we're seeing, right? So it's not just one study that's found this. We're now finding 5 or 6 studies that say this, or 5 or 6 studies that say that, which is making us feel more confident in the outcome.
Okay, that's what I thought too. And that's where I've gotten in my own research and my own reading as well. And nowhere do I claim to be an expert. I'm just reading from the experts. And I appreciate the fact, oh, go ahead, Dr. Igo, you were going to say something.
No, as are we, just reading from the experts.
Right. So nowhere, and I guess my concern, or as we go forward, I commend you for getting to the point where you have been able to change and adapt to what we're reading. And so I think that that's, it just shows the fluidity of what we're doing. And so I appreciate that tremendously. And my last question, the COVID dashboard that we have, we've had some questions on how we're counting COVID positivity on those. Can we speak a little bit to the metrics, how we're doing our own District 203 COVID dashboard?
Sure. And in terms of what do we count as a positive case, is that specifically what you're asking?
That's my question.
Okay. Yeah. So we're following the, we have to report the cases back to the DuPage County Health Department, and they provide us with kind of, here's what we need from you. And we report any case in which a student or a staff member, but I'll certainly let Bob talk about that, has had a positive test, or in which they've seen a doctor and the doctor has made a clinical diagnosis. And there's very specific criteria that a doctor uses to make a clinical diagnosis, or he hasn't opted for a test. For instance, there might be, somebody may live in a household where there is already, somebody's already been diagnosed with COVID, and then this particular person begins to show the 3 top signs. They might make a clinical diagnosis without sending that person for a test.
Okay, I think there was some confusion out in the community about that. So that helps me a lot. Thank you, Dr. Igo.
I don't know, Bob, if you want to add to that.
Oh, he's good. Last comment, thank you for the transition activities that you created for January 11th to 22nd for our kindergartners, 6th graders, 9th graders, and new students. I appreciate that. I think that group really needs a little extra, and I appreciate that. And that's all.
Questions from the board? Okay, I have a couple more questions, and if anybody in the meantime comes up with a question, please
Christine has questions.
Oh, I'm sorry. Christine, I keep missing your hand. I'm so sorry. Okay, go ahead, Christine.
I'm probably just in a weird spot on your screen. That's okay. Just real quick to go back to the topic about the childcare issues. The partnerships we have with the Y and Champions and the Alive Center, they know what we're planning in January, and they're able to move with us in terms of providing whatever is needed for our families. Is that still?
That's it. Yes, that's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah, yep, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I finish.
I was just going to say that, we planned with them earlier in the year when we were, planning for the transition in October, and have been in touch since. So they're already moving in this direction to transition their schedules.
And then we're okay on like the space that we have in our buildings with those programs, because some of the kids that attend like in the morning, they're going to stay all day. Well, it doesn't matter if they attend in the morning. There are some kids who would essentially be in the building all day. Will we be able to keep like everybody separate based, even if they're not supposed to be there that day, but they've already signed up for that program? And does that question make sense?
It does. Obviously not. Obviously, we don't have unlimited space, right? But yeah, based on our current enrollment and anticipated increase in enrollment, based on some of the family reach out that happened back in October, we're confident that we have the space. We're prioritizing AM assignments for students that would go into the YMCA or the Champions program on site. So those students could come as early as 7 or 7:30 in the morning before school, get childcare, then go to school for the morning, and then immediately at 10:45 move back into the YMCA or Champions program if that's the need of the family.
That's it, Kristen. Thanks.
Okay, I have a couple more questions. I just wanted to reiterate that what I think I heard in terms of the substantial, the data that we now have with regard to substantial transmission in the community and how that impacts schools. So one of the things I thought I heard that you said is that our data with our own students that we are serving in person has helped us to understand that we are still able to mitigate the spread of COVID, even with substantial community transmission. I think you also mentioned that I know that we have had a limited number in person, but I think you also mentioned that you have been working with other school districts who were in person during time of substantial spread and seen similar data. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
That's correct. Yep.
Right. So that's again something that is informing us that wasn't something that we were able to have, data we were able to have as we were making our decisions initially, but we have that data now. Okay. Thank you for highlighting the transition activities, and I'm very glad that we're going to be able to bring back some of the students, like our kindergarten students, to meet the teacher, et cetera. When do you expect to give parents details about that? Thinking about like work schedules, et cetera. No parent is going to want to miss that, and yet they're going to need to make planning for those activities during the day. And I would say probably the same thing for those 6th grade and 9th grade, even though the parent wouldn't have to be with them, they might have to transport them. So I'm just wondering, when will we have more detail about those kinds of activities?
Yeah, for kindergarten, it will be as soon after winter break as we possibly can get that to our parents. Our kindergarten teachers in each school are going to be working with their administrators just to modify the schedule, so to speak, based on number of students that are coming in person, how many sections they have. So every building will have a little bit of a different plan, but there'll be consistency based on how much they're coming in, what the focus is for that visit, and so on and so forth. So I would say probably within just days after winter break, they'll be reaching out to parents.
Okay.
I would say the same thing for secondary. Each building is working on their own unique plan based on teams and, and grade levels and things like that. But each principal will communicate with their families.
Okay. A question that had come up earlier when we were looking at the elementary schedule, and I know that we've already talked in more detail about that, but in terms of honors math and PI students in the elementary schedule, I know we had talked about the fact that you were going to address some of those questions about how that would be addressed. Could you just review that for our community?
Yeah, so I'll start, and maybe Mrs. Willard wants to chime in as well. But I think what's important for a starting point is to recognize that learning will include direct instruction, but it's also independent practice. So this is really a play between the time that a student is in the classroom, as well as the time that the student might be practicing and reinforcing those skills even during that remote part of the day. So because there's 2 honors math sections a day, and there's 2 project idea sections a day in a typical elementary school, and I'm talking about 4th and 5th grade specifically, and now we'll have students spread across AM and PM potentially. Our honors math and project idea students will get direct instruction from the PI honors math teacher, but they will have some of that time back in their homeroom classroom, supported by the classroom teacher when they're doing some of the independent practice. In PI, that is specifically because the writing portion of literacy is taught by the homeroom teacher. And so those project idea students do need to be in the homeroom classroom for writing instruction when that part of literacy is taught. And for our honors math students, that application of the mini lesson and what have you will be done back in the classroom, back in the homeroom classroom, that is, and again, supported by the homeroom teacher. Keep in mind that the homeroom teachers will have far less students a day in the classroom at that time. So we're talking about, 8, 10, 12 students in person. So their ability to support students in that range of learners will be enhanced simply by the fact that the students are divided in half. Mrs. Willard, did I miss any key pieces to that?
No, the only thing that I would add is that honors math and PI teacher will be planning for that whole time of instruction. So when they go back into the classroom, what the classroom teacher will be there to help is if they have any fix-up questions they would have. But the instruction is designed by the honors math and the PI teacher.
Okay. I know that as we are heading back in person, we're still going to be working to recover some of the academic things that have been challenges for students during the time period where we were remote fully. And I know that part of that is that 1:30 to 3 or 1:30 to 2:50 or 1:30 to 3 time period. I know you did such a great job expressing all the different ways that can be used. How would parents be thinking about how that might look for their student in terms of how often they might be in person for those kinds of activities once we're back in person, or how that would work with transportation, et cetera, in terms of the fact that we've got that, that specific block schedule, but that wonderful 1:30 to 3 time period where we can really be working on those academic needs and, just being able to plan for it.
One thing that time allows us to do is be responsive to the student needs in front of us. So it could look 100 different ways right now based on what that student needs. And I think that's, of course, the hard thing sometimes for us to, wrap our head around, but I think it's the most responsive thing we can do for kids. So there will be times where if I was, let's say, a B student, and I was at school on Thursday and Friday, that I might continue to stay I may bring a lunch and I may stay and have lunch on site. And then I may be supported by a team of teachers in that afternoon. And then we would have our transportation provided for that student. The other thing that could happen is if I'm a B student, I may go home that day, and what my teacher might do is Zoom with all of the students, A and B, and online. And what our PLCs will do are they'll make sure that they group students by need. They look at their assessments, they look at what skills students need some intervention on. Maybe they just need to reteach, or even some students that might need extensions. And that's how they're going to group it. So it might look different for my student on a weekly basis. Some students will be seen more than others, for sure, but it's just a responsive model. And that's what we always have done in our MTSS process. So it will look different based on needs, but one thing that we will ensure that our teachers will be working with students at that time. And it will be communicated with our older students, most likely through the student. And of course, for our youngest learners, our elementary teachers and the EC teachers are great at making sure that that parent knows when their student needs to log in or when their student needs to be on premise for more learning.
Thank you. That's really helpful to kind of give a little bit of just context to how it will look. I know it will be different for each student. And I know that, if parents are concerned, they can reach out to their teacher and make sure that their student is included in these various things, but the teachers will be inviting students as well. And so that's really, I think, helpful to understand in terms of just a really important tool for us to express in giving support to the students that they need. I know we'll have additional things that we'll work on as well that will help students as well academically. But I think that 1:30 to 3 time period is going to be really going forward, continuing to be a really important window for supporting students.
And we'll continue to update you on that, especially as we start bringing students in to make sure that if anything's different or new, that we make sure that you know that as well.
Okay, thank you. And then the last is just a clarification. I know in our previous presentations, we've had confusion about when we use the metric 50% of students. By that, you mean 100% of the students who want to be in person will be in 50% of the time, correct? Right, okay, just wanted to make sure of that. Okay, those are the questions that I have. Are there other questions from the board? Okay, I do not see additional questions with regard to return to learn, so we will go on to in our agenda to the president's report. I know that we are continuing to monitor as a part of our lobbying organization, LEND, federal developments and state developments in terms of funding, which are changing. We're getting a brief update that there's agreement on the federal level, but I think we, as a part of our advocacy organization, don't quite know how that will translate to individual school districts. Dan, do you have any additional data than I do? I saw that brief update from LEND right before the board meeting. Do you have any additional data about the federal actions and how that will impact schools?
I don't at this time, no.
Right. So I don't either, but that is something that we'll be continuing to work with our advocacy organizations to ensure that as soon as that detail is available, that we're able to translate that back to our schools. Okay, item 8.06, Board of Education reports. Are there any Board of Education reports? I do not see any hands, so I'll go on to item 9, discussion without action. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm all set.
Yep. Okay, 9.01, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, we'll talk more about this in January. It's on the agenda really as a follow-up to last Board of Education meeting. We had the audit report presented to the board and the community. And certain budgeted expenditures for the 2019-2020 school year were lower than allowed for in the district's annual budget last year. And it was determined that certain anticipated budgeted expenditures attributed to in-person learning were not necessary due to our shift to remote learning and our inability really to provide certain services related to the COVID-19 pandemic. As a result of greater than projected revenue and less than expected expenditures, we ended the fiscal year with a larger than planned surplus. And so one of the goals of the board, and the board has given me, is really to ensure that we are stewarding our resources effectively. So the administration has been working on finalizing some recommendations to bring to the Board of Education in January that will really address that goal. I mean, the board has accomplished, the stewardship of the community's resources in previous years through things like abatements and reductions to the extension. And as a result of the unplanned surplus this year, we are in a unique position to provide some additional relief to our taxpayers. So we will be working on finalizing what some of that will be, which could look at things like reimbursements to taxpayers, maybe in some certain fees perhaps. But we also know as a result of the pandemic, in a pause on continuous in-person instruction, we anticipate students are going to need additional time and support, both academic and social emotional skills. So we're working on a framework of varied supports that will assist in our goal to maximize student learning, provide targeted, differentiated support that will fill gaps and accelerate learning for all of our students. We'll be finalizing those recommendations and hope to bring a greater detail and information to the board and community at our January 4th and then perhaps January 25th Board of Education meetings.
Great, thank you for that overview. I think that the board has been, as you reflect, very supportive of ensuring that whenever we are able to, we're able to return funds to our taxpayers. And I think as well, throughout our questions and comments on Return to Learn, we've expressed the board's willingness and desire to support with additional resources any kinds of needs that our students have. So thank you for that overview. Questions from the board? Donna. Oh, I see Charles. Sorry. I'll let Charles go since I know that board leadership tries to go last. I'll let Charles go first.
Donna's hand was up first. That's fine.
You two work it out. Whoever wants to go first is fine.
All right.
Go ahead,
Thanks,
Donna.
Charles.
Go ahead, Donna. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm super excited that we are going to be able to do some kind of reimbursement to our taxpayers. So thank you for working on that for the administration and for bringing that forward in this resolution. I just want to be sure, and I know I've heard you say other things here, Dan, but I just want to make sure that we note that we also have set aside any of these surplus funds for any additional items like the testing that you mentioned and things that we need to do, because I think our priority obviously is looking out for the taxpayer, but I think our priority above that is getting students into the classroom. So I want to make sure that our community understands and maybe hears from you, Dan, in regard to this is an additional reimbursement, not to be something that will interfere with us getting, like later, I don't want to have us not being able to do something because we're low on funds to be able to get students back in the classroom.
As we've talked about, our priority is to return to in-person instruction and to get our kids into school. So we will certainly ensure that the recommendations we bring to the board do not prohibit that from occurring. Matter of fact, some of what we recommend will probably just only enhance and support that As you mentioned, testing, that's going to be a new cost that we're going to have to take on. As a large district, that's going to be a fairly significant cost. So certainly will be a part of what we do to try to get students more back into class.
All right, thank you for that. I think that when taxpayers see this, they'll be excited, and then the very next question will be, well, what about the students? And so I want us to make sure we have a very global perspective on that. And then the other thing is within this resolution, there's some details as to the amount that we're looking at, but I think that I asked a question. I brought a question to you earlier today, Dan, as far as that's not necessarily, we're still working on that number, correct?
That is correct. And the resolution still is in draft form. That's why it's not out there yet. So we are still finalizing that and balancing that with any additional recommendations we may make to the Board of Education to support the return to in-person instruction.
Great. Thank you. So we look forward to more details. Thank you.
Charles.
Great. Yeah, so mine's more of a comment, and Dan, just wanted to say thank you for this. I think to echo some of Donna's comments, I think it's really important that we are looking at this for the community. I think the community will appreciate it. I also think that it's really reflective of not only that the priority is the kids and the students and making sure, but it's also making sure that we're playing our role in the broader community as well, and also recognizing the layers and layers of challenges that this pandemic has caused. So recognizing that, there's some additional things that additional resources we're able to provide back. So I just thank you for the range of things you're looking at, and and I'd really be interested as you roll some of these things out and as you make some specific dollar amounts and recommendations and different things, that we're also able to link the specific things to some of the observations. So in the return to learn plan, we talked a little bit about observations, things we've learned. I think it's going to be really important to, as we make decisions on what things we want this to look like, what these reimbursements and additional supports could look like, that we're linking it to the observations that we're making and the data that we have, because I know that that's how your team is coming up with it. But I think it's important that we're really transparent with the community about some of those things, because some folks will recognize some things and others won't. So I just want to make sure that as we bring those forward, we're connecting those dots for folks.
Questions from the board? Okay, I just also want to thank you for reflecting kind of the conversation that we had in March before we before the pandemic shutdown. We were having that conversation about our tax levy and wanting to ensure that in this time of great need in our community, that we are responsive to that need. And the difficulty for us that in March when we were having that discussion was anticipating what the needs would be. So now that we are able to have more data about that, I'm just really appreciative that we're able to look at all of those areas that we could anticipate at that time, that we're able to address the needs that we have for in-person learning, the testing, any additional capital improvements we need to ensure that we have safe spaces for students, that we're able to look at our academic and social emotional needs of our students, making sure that we're recovering any pandemic losses, and that with additional funds that we have, we're able to address that concern of our community, which we know is a difficult time, that they are facing financial hardship that they haven't in the past. So thank you for working on that presentation, and I look forward to, and I know the board looks forward with great support for all of those proposals that you'll bring to us in the future. Any additional comments? Okay. All right, so then we will go on to item 10, discussion with action. And so we will go to item 10.01, 2020 tax levy determination.
At the November 16th and December 7th Board of Education meetings, we were able to provide background information to the Board of Education regarding our recommendation for a tax levy. Resolution is attached in board docs. Recommend that the Board of Education support the 2020 tax levy as presented, which is to extend to the full amount of authority in the condition that we will review any additional aggregate abatement prior to March. Again, along the lines of savings to our taxpayers, that recommendation includes an abatement of the debt service levy to be made in March. We did have a reconstructed Citizens Finance Advisors Committee have an opportunity to hear our financial forecast and our recommendation, and they support it as presented. Mr. Francis, anything additional that we need to present? Be happy to answer any questions from the board.
Questions from the board? Okay, thank you for that review of the process. Absolutely. We will be continuing to look at this throughout the January, February, March timeframe before we have to make our final decision on abatements to ensure that we are continuing to keep all these goals in mind. I also would add my thanks to our Citizen Finance Committee, some new members, some members who've been there some time. We are so appreciative of the time that you take and the expertise that you offer to advise us on financial issues like our tax levy and like our 5-year financial forecast and even like our audit and those other types of financial issues that we look at as a board. So thank you to each of those committee members for your time. And thank you to my other board member, Christine, who was there as well, representing the Board of Education. Any additional comments from the board? Okay, if not, I'll take a motion.
All right, because we are going to revisit this back in later in March, I will make a motion to approve item 10.01, the 2020 tax levy determination as presented.
Second, Gerke.
A motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Leong,
Aye.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Yangrohr,
Aye.
Wanke.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will move on in our agenda to item 10.02, designate individuals to prepare the budget.
Okay, Illinois law requires that certain procedures the school board has to follow to adopt its annual budget. And the first step is to designate an individual or individuals to develop a budget in its tentative form. I recommend that the Board of Education designate Mike Francis, our Chief Financial Officer, Chief School Business Official, to begin the process of drafting the 2021-2022 budget in its tentative form.
Okay, questions from the Board of Education? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move approval of item 10.02, designate individual to prepare the budget as presented. Kush. Sorry.
Kosminski.
And a second from Kosminski. So a motion and a second are heard. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Yangrohr,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Leong,
Aye.
Gerke,
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. So we will go on in our agenda to item 11, old business. We do not have any old business. So we will go on to item 12, new business. We do not have any new business. So we'll move to item 13, upcoming events. Item 1301, schedule of events.
Great, and just a reminder, and I know people have it on their calendar. Tomorrow will be our last day of school before the winter vacation. I'd like to wish a happy and safe winter vacation to our community and ask again that you have a safe winter vacation and be mindful of our mitigation strategies throughout our state as you plan your events over the holidays. And our next Board of Education meeting will be on January 4th, and again, provide further updating regarding return to learn at that time.
Okay. All right, so then oh, sorry, Paul, I'm sorry.
It's someone from the administration remind people that tomorrow is also the deadline for submitting their preference for remote versus hybrid.
Thank you. Yes,
for
please.
that reminder.
I do believe we have some communications going on that even tomorrow.
Thank you. That's a good reminder. All right. So then we will go on to item 14, adjournment. Item 1401, motion to adjourn. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Wanke, I move
Kush,
to
I move
adjourn.
we adjourn. Rejourn, you're at the sorry.
Okay, so a motion from
Go ahead,
Kush
Donna.
and a second from Wanke. Okay, a motion from
Yeah,
Kush, a
good to
second
me.
from Wanke. Please call the roll, Mrs. Patton.
Gerke,
Aye.
Fitzgerald,
Aye.
Kosminski,
Aye.
Kush,
Aye.
Yangrohr,
Aye.
Wanke,
Aye.
Leong.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes.